The boy was petting the cat, which he called Nick. He told him that his life was boring and meaningless. But finally, he saw light in the future. Thanks to magic and the ability to change things, he can get anything. He will prove himself. Behind him appeared a large paw. He grabbed the cat and pressed it to himself, shouting fiercely. In this other world, he will show what he is capable of. Once, in the middle of the forest, there was a cart with people. One horse was pulling the cart with 2 passengers. They were surrounded by others on horses and people walking on foot. One girl shuddered. Another called her by name. It turned out her name was Karina. She took off her hood and muttered that it was strange. The grandfather who raised him died after the death of his parents. Now he believes that he is left alone for life. The funeral and other memorial rites ended 2 hours ago. He lay on the bed, looked at the phone, and said he was surprised that 10 days had passed since his death. He was reading messages with selection results. The Kawakato HR department thanked him for choosing their company and wrote that, due to careful selection, unfortunately, they could not hire him. After reading this message, the boy threw the phone and continued looking at the ceiling. He remembered how people said that if the scholarship was not returned, he would have to find a job. They were grateful for the money because otherwise, they could not study at the university. He was advised to look for a regular job instead of chasing dreams he did not have. Everyone talked about the future but lived their own dreams. He thought that working in a good company would please his grandfather. But the room still had a depressed atmosphere. Suddenly, the cat jumped on the boy. He began to pet him and said that he was the only one he had. Despite the mood, he had nowhere to go. After lunch, he would have to go look for a job. He remembered the box on the bed. When he opened it, he saw 3 old rings. He carefully examined them and took them in his hands. Finally, he decided to try one on, and it fit perfectly. The cat tore one of the rings from the box with its teeth. The boy shouted at Nick not to touch them. The rings accidentally got caught. One was on the boy's finger, the other in the cat's mouth. Suddenly, a bright light appeared. At that moment, the boy had already opened his eyes from the blinding light and saw that they were on some mountain peak, and he did not understand what was happening and did not know if it was really a dream. He looked around but saw only huge mountains and fields. He did not understand where he was or how he got there. The cat approached him, and he picked it up, holding it tightly. He was lying on the bed and wanted to eat, did not know how he ended up here and what he did. Suddenly noticed that a piece of jewelry was missing and decided that it was definitely because of the rings. But the rings did not go onto the boy's finger or the cat's. He clearly remembers that she put the ring on his finger. I couldn't have just lost it. It is necessary to find out if the rings are connected to the fact that he was here. Maybe that's why he is here. This is not manga or anime. I doubt that this was really another world. The boy heard something from the side and noticed that he himself was barefoot. When it turned out that he ended up in another world, he was supposed to have some kind of cheat ability. He prayed to God for it to happen. He shouted across the whole neighborhood, trying to open the statistics, but opened his eyes and realized there was nothing in front of him. He was clearly stuck here. The cat approached and began licking his face. The boy turned to him, said he didn't care at all, and noticed that his cat was floating in the air. He fell to the ground in fear, his eyes wide open. He shouted and asked the cat how it learned to fly. He doubted whether this ability had really appeared in him and not in the cat. The cat landed on his head. The boy comfortably lay on the field, said that everything was bad and he clearly could not survive here. Then thought about it. Nick can cheat, but that's not all. You need to understand what else he can do. A window appeared before him, like in video games. It turned out to be Nick's stats table, which hadn't been there before, but the table was recorded under the name Daiichi Asakura. He had homeless magic and a special skill of distribution and evaluation. It turned out that these were indeed his characteristics. He also has the ability to cheat. But he does not understand what exchange is. The grade is satisfactory, classic cheating. The cat continued to circle around him, and he decided to test his evaluation skills on the cat. It turned out that the cat possessed spiritual magic of earth, water, fire, and wind, and the boy realized that the cat was cooler than him. His skill at deception became his livelihood. Even if he returns to Japan, his whole life will be lonely, so he will have to try hard and survive in this world. And first he needs to find out what this evaluation is capable of. Wandering through the field, he approached the edge of the forest, placed his palm on the trunk of a tree and decided to use his skill, and there he was told that the leaf width is 1.5 centimeters. The branch length is 8 meters. There are many leaves, and the height is 40 meters. When he thought the evaluation went well, a window lit up before him again. He pressed the button and the tree disappeared. The boy sharply hit himself on the head. He did not understand what was happening. It was a strange ability of exchange. At that moment, his cat suddenly broke free, and the man had to let her go. He apologized to the cat. He looked at the cat and asked it to step aside. Then he decided to use his ability on one of the trees, and it immediately evaporated. The cat approached the pit left after the tree and began to sniff. The boy asked if he was surprised and told him to look at the table. He used his magic again, and a tree appeared in place of the pit. The cat jumped aside. The cat hissed in fear, and the man apologized and asked him not to be angry. The time had come for him to seriously test his abilities. The tree he saved remained in the inventory, and he could exchange it for points. He thought he needed to buy shoes and checked that such a purchase was available in the system. Immediately after selling the wood, he had enough money for this purchase, and was able to exchange his glasses for new sneakers. The ability to exchange proved very useful. Now he can definitely survive and even get rich. The future is brighter for him, and his motivation has increased. He began putting into the inventory everything he saw to the left and right, even a large tree and a big stone, and the list of collected items became very long. With that money, he decided to buy a chainsaw. It was expensive, but that did not stop him, so he decided to take it, for now only to test it, because he was still hungry. Suddenly his cat looked aside and began to hiss, and the boy asked him what was wrong. Some noises were heard somewhere in the forest. A large black tiger was running straight at them. The boy thought he was cute. The beast growled, and he fell to the ground on his backside. The boy tried to use his ability to store things on animals, but it did not work. When he placed trees in the internal storage, birds or insects did not get in there. He does not know how everything is arranged, but besides plants, no other living creatures are accepted there. He has nothing, no weapons. He needs at least to scare off the tiger. He thought he should strike first and kill, giving no chance for resistance. He kept telling himself to stay calm. The tiger was still far away. So far, everything is fine. You need to keep your distance. He needs at least 100 meters to have time to open the safe. It was not for nothing that he was testing his abilities. His cat continued to hiss while the tiger approached them. The boy told him not to worry, that everything would be fine. Waiting until the beast came as close as possible, the boy used his storage, and a huge pit appeared under the tiger, into which the beast fell. He continued to use his abilities. In the pit appeared a huge sea container with liquid nitrogen. The tiger began to fall into it, trying to grab the container walls with its claws. Finally, he decided that he had succeeded and asked the cat if he liked his idea. It seemed simple to him, but suddenly the cat looked away again. Immediately, someone climbed out of the pit, and it turned out to be the tiger, which was still alive. He panicked. He clearly needed a weapon. At that moment, his cat used his powers against the beast. They were bullets made of water, Nick's spiritual magic. They resembled armor-piercing shells more. But the tiger had nothing to do with this. It kept advancing on them, and the man looked into his inventory for something that could help, and decided to build a wall. He waited again until the tiger came close, and used all his strength. He had nowhere to run, but he was ready to attack, even if it meant the end. The tiger moved strangely, and the boy thought something was wrong with it. This was his last chance, and at that moment he took a stone from the inventory, which fell on the animal. This is the end. Just in case, he tried to add the defeated one to the inventory and succeeded. At first he set traps, bought food, weapons, and tools. I bought myself a drone and watched what was happening through it. Through its camera, he saw a large expedition. He decided that the ability to share was too banal even for him. He petted his cat who was eating and said it was time for first contact. A little later, two from the expedition were riding horses across the field. One of them noticed the boy with the cat sitting on a stone ahead, and that boy greeted them. They asked him if he was traveling alone, and he replied that they were traveling with their animals. The girl was surprised when she saw the cat. He asked if they saw them so rarely. She replied that it happened quite often, but never with such a long coat. He introduced himself as Asakura Daichi and named his cat. The girl took off her hood and said her name was Alicia Heartland. The boy, seeing her beauty, was confused, and I thought she looked like a schoolgirl. The other girl on the horse looked at me strangely, and the boy said that if she wanted to pet him, she could. She wanted to address him, but her partner put a sword between them. She told Alicia to step back and apologized, and the girl with the sword looked at the boy and asked if he was really here alone. He replied that he really called himself a merchant, said he left the village and became a beginner in trade. It was a legend he invented about himself, and he began to show all the goods he had collected. There are really many things in the small bag. He has many useful items, for example, a flashlight. The girls looked at him with surprise. They had never seen anything like that before. The girl with the sword asked if he took this magical item from the storage, but another noticed that this was not the case. She did not feel any magic from this glowing item. The boy thought that since they were talking about it, there must still be a warehouse and magical tools, so statistics was magic. He placed the flashlight on the ground, pushed it so that it rolled to them, and said that they could take it. One of the girls took it and applied it to her face, saying that it was definitely not a magical device. The other could not believe it. He asked if they were going together, but the girl with the ball said that she was accompanying the other girl. The boy got scared, but added that if they did not mind, he would like to go with them to the nearest town or village and asked to name the other girl. The first one looked quite cute. She said it was unlikely that a bad person would ask them for this, but the defense lawyer said that he already had enough suspicions. The boy replied that if she was worried, he could easily put away his weapon, but there was no point in hiding a weapon he did not know how to use. His hands showed that he did not know how to use either a bow or a knife. The good-natured man laughed and said that she had figured him out. The girl was embarrassed. She agreed to escort him to the chief merchant. The man was glad. He thanked the beautiful girls for their help. At that moment, the cat jumped out of his hands straight into Alicia's arms. She gently stroked the cat and said how cute he was. The boy was still standing with his hand extended to shake, but he was clearly being ignored. Then he turned to the guard standing behind, still with his hand extended, and thanked her for the help. She said she would take him to the chief merchant but asked me not to approach her closer than a meter. She could not allow a mage to come that close to them. He asked which exact mage she was talking about. She told him not to pretend that he was traveling alone and did not know how to fight. Then he understood what she meant. She reminded him that he needed to go with them but stay aside. The boy noticed that her sword was quite long, and she told him that he had changed his tone. He asked without hesitation what was wrong with it. After all, they were the same age. She told him that she speaks as she wishes, but will not do anything that would make her attack him, and he asked if he was really that suspicious, to which she replied yes. Behind them walked a girl, and the horse was pulling her cloak with its teeth. She looked only at the lantern in her hand. The boy turned his head and saw an expedition with many people. One of the carriages stopped, and an elderly man got out, asking if he was the one being escorted to the city of Kurama. The boy placed his hand on his chest, slightly bowed his head, and said his name. The other replied that his name was Klaus Bertram. He manages this caravan and leads the Bertram Company. The boy does not know how much influence he has, so he behaves politely. He said that he does not have experience in these matters yet. Then the man asked him what he could offer in return. The boy handed over a bag with unknown contents and said he could sell it to him. The man looked at his assistant from behind, gave him a sign, and he approached the boy. I take the bag from his hands and give it to the owner. When he discovered this, he was surprised. He told the boy that he was either very generous or did not know the real price. The boy replied that he probably did not know how much it costs, this country. The man considered the whole situation. The boy replied that the price of the goods may vary depending on place and time. Although it is grown in his country, it still remains a rare and valuable commodity. The men replied that he was completely honest. The boy said that he was also a merchant. Lies would not help with this. The man agreed. Everything was going as the boy had planned. He thanked the man and said that his grandfather had taught him this. In response, the man decided to honestly say that in this country, this product was very valuable and probably cost more than in his native country. He asked how much pepper was in the sack. No country on the continent could grow pepper. Everything depended on imports, and only aristocrats and rich people used it. His goods were not from another country, but from another continent, and he did not have permission, so one man looked at him strangely. He shuddered and realized that now they knew he was not local. He said that he immediately thought that he looked unusual, as if he had come from another continent. The boy could only agree with this, but then they might have problems. The man thanked me for the warning. The merchant said that they still needed to discuss the price of the pepper, but the man asked to wait. He asked if he wanted to buy anything else. He thought about becoming a merchant in this country, but that man said that he was not local, knowledge was needed to live here, so it was necessary to find out if he could help him. The man said that he was honest, but that boy just wanted to see the good in people. The man just laughed at this. He could not just make him a merchant like that. In this case, the boy asked how much pepper he wanted in return. The man showed a number on his fingers, and the boy thought it was pointless to hope that he would help just like that. He took 5 sacks of pepper out of his backpack. The merchant said that it was not bad. They should treat a trading partner with respect. His grandfather had taught him this, but in fact, he had read about it in a book. Klaus told Lloyd's servant to take the pepper, and then turned to Karina. He asked her to stay with Alicia and take Mr. Asakura to the city of Kurama. I asked Alicia if she agreed, and she consented. The men headed to the carriage. The boy extended his hand for a handshake and thanked the girls for their help. They bowed. Karina said she would go with him, and the other added that she would also be nearby. The girls moved forward, ignoring the boy's outstretched hand. He asked where they were going. They answered that to Karina's boss. Alicia will tell him everything later. The boy asked me to call him Daichi. He doesn't need formality. He wants to be treated like a friend. The embarrassed girl wanted to say that she did what she could, but the boy shoved a cat right under her nose and called it his partner Nick. The cat seemed to agree and meowed, and the girl's heart melted again. The boy and the cat looked at each other and said that he was letting go of his paws. The cat began to fall. The girl immediately grabbed him and started to pet him. A guy approached her, said she was hugging Nick, introduced himself as Daichi and smiled, and the girl was confused. He followed her with a satisfied face, asked if she would go while holding him in her arms, and she agreed. He came even closer, said he couldn't hear her, clearly teasing, and she screamed again, uttering the word master. The boy made a sad facial expression, and she finally called him by his first name without formalities. This amused him greatly. But the cat clearly disliked something. Meanwhile, in another part of the camp, there were tents everywhere. The merchant sat at the table and asked Lloyd what he thought about the new guy. He replied that he speaks their language too well for a guest. He nods and speaks politely. His hands are clean, which means he has never worked, because he grew up in a wealthy family and has a good education. Klaus noticed this too. He inquired about the other one, that is, about Pepper. The servant said that most likely he gave her away as a token of gratitude. He is either the son of a rich man or the dumbest son of an aristocrat. Bertram noticed that he might become an important person in the future. He has a reserve because the product has been preserved so well. There is a beautiful and tasty pepper on the table. Maybe that was how it was. Storage is a rare skill given by God. The owner can put items there and they will be preserved for a long time. The capacity depends on the magical power of the owner. Inside, time stops. A magic bag is a storage in the form of a bag or pouch where items can be placed. The internal capacity can be increased, but it is limited and time does not stop. He thinks about pretending as if he pulled something out of the magic bag and was able to cross the sea. He is still young in the matter of storage. We need to find out if there are valuable things in the storage. First, they need to learn about this unknown country, and then the servant asked if they would stop treating him politely, but he was told that there was no need for that. But he needs to warn the workers and staff to treat him politely. The boy noticed that two men were sitting near the tent, and one of them showed a box in which lay an expensive glass with an interesting pattern. The hero was surprised that in this world a glass goblet is expensive, although the glass is of average quality. Outside, someone called Karina, calling her sister. It was a girl with short hair and a headscarf. She was sitting near the cauldron and asked for help to light the fire. Karina apologized, saying she needed to see someone off. The boy wondered why they asked Karina if she did it with magic. He said he would like to see it, and then repeated aloud that he wanted her to light the fire. She agreed if that was what he wanted. The girl who asked for help thanked Karina, asked if it would be difficult for her to light the fire with flint, then raised her hand, placed her palm on the firewood, and immediately kindled the fire. It was spiritual fire magic. The fire lit immediately as soon as she raised her hand. Nick's offensive magic was also impressive, but it was interesting how magic was used in everyday life. The boy asked her if she always helps to light the fire. It turned out that she does this only when she is not busy. She walked among the same cauldrons with stoves and lit a fire in each one. Those who cannot control fire magic obtain it with flint. Alicia said that in such cases, magical artifacts are used. He inquired about the presence of magical power and the possibility of using artifacts. It turned out that she had none. The profession he can obtain is determined by magic. The stronger the magic, the more prestigious the profession. People without magic can only use artifacts. Both groups still make a living. The boy remembered his past and asked the girls if the quality of life depends on magic. Karina called Mr. Asakuri. He flinched and noticed the girl who had asked for help a few minutes ago. Her face was upset. His eyes widened. He realized he had said too much, covered his mouth with his palm, and swore. He apologized to the girl. She said it was okay and that she was already used to it. So, she has no magical powers, but she works in a good company. Everyone here is kind and helps each other. She is lucky, but she said it with sadness. Thanks to his ability to deceive, he managed to become a merchant. But it turned out to be a bad and selfish idea. With this ability, he can help people without magic. He looked at his hands and pondered. It would be interesting to shake the foundations of this world. People without magic can live just like those with magic, using artifacts. If he spreads their knowledge, people without magic will treat him well. It is only his imagination, but he has enough motivation. He called Carrot and handed her a lighter, saying that she could take this thing to start a fire. At that very moment, he showed how it works, by pressing the lighter button that everyone in his world uses. Everyone was disappointed. Karina said he was very small. She saw such a magical artifact for the first time, but their other companion noticed that it did not look like him. It was transparent like a precious stone. The man said it was a lighter, handed it to Corette and asked him to try it, but she began to tremble with her hands and said she could not accept such an expensive thing. At that moment, the man opened his hand, and the lighter fell to the ground. Everyone looked and was shocked. He said it was unexpectedly strong. Even if he broke it into 2 parts, he would not be angry. He asked her not to worry and to try to push the object into the girl's hands. She lit the lighter and brought it to the dry leaves. They immediately caught fire, and she threw them into the stove. The logs burned. She looked at the object with admiration and could not believe that such an incredible artifact could exist. Its homeland must be very beautiful. The hero said he wanted people in this country without magic to be able to use magical artifacts. The girl asked if he was a foreign trader with such amazing things, and she was sure he would definitely succeed. She handed him the lighter in his hands. She thanked him, but he said he would not take it and that she could keep the lighter for herself. She was surprised. He told his teammates to go and join them. The girl asked him to wait. She said she could not accept that. She tried to stop him, grabbing his clothes. He kept repeating that she was not that expensive. Suddenly, someone interrupted them and called Karina. The man asked what she was doing here. He was tall, with scars on his face and wearing a knight chainmail. Karina called him her boss and said she was just going to him. The hero thought to himself that he was very big. Karina introduced him as Captain Jeffrey. She also introduced the main character, business partner of calling him Bertram. Daishai extended his hand for a handshake and said he would go with them to the next city. Jeffrey said he was responsible for the security and escort of Bertram's company. Karina said the boss ordered her to keep an eye on this man. The captain in response ordered her to accompany these two. She agreed. The hero wondered if she was really a guard and if she needed an escort again. The captain called Mr. Asakura and entrusted him to go with him. He asked if he wanted a drink, but the boy refused. The girl, who was given a new thing, stood with the lighter in her hand and looked surprised at the people who were leaving. They had a good lunch. The hero was already lying comfortably on the mattress in the tent, and the cat was lying on his stomach. He thought that others were so impressed by the plastic lighter that they even compared it to a precious stone, and he thought that maybe he had overdone it a bit. At that moment, Karina called Mr. Asakura from the street and asked if he was not sleeping, and he replied that he was not sleeping. She apologized for being late, but the boss wants to talk to him. That man replied that he would be there soon and doubted whether his watch looked suspicious. He decided to hide them for now. He put on his jacket and thought about possible problems. They were walking between the tents. There were many people around. Drunk men were looking at him. He was surprised by the attention from outside. They approached a large tent, and Karina said that they needed to go here. The guy pushed aside the fabric that served as the entrance and apologized. Inside was the head of the merchants and one of the girls who accompanied him today. The man pushed back a chair and told him to sit down. Everyone sat at the table, and the man apologized for calling him so late in the evening. The hero wondered what could have happened. If something was wrong, he could exchange the goods. The merchant said that this was not the case, and that the goods he gave were excellent. Then the guy asked what the matter was. The man put a roll of fabric on the table, inside which there was something. The merchant wanted to talk about the lighter. The guy remembered that he had given it today. Correct. The merchant extended his palm so that he would not be misunderstood. He did not take it back. The girl wanted to consult about the lighter, a magical artifact that she had never seen before. The man with a serious face told him that he did not understand the true value. The guy was surprised. Of course, he thought to sell it as a household item. The man told him that it was an artifact used by aristocrats and wealthy people, and added that in his country it could be free, but here it was very expensive. The hero asked if it was considered a simple artifact, to which the man shook his head. It can be used by people without magic, so it is more valuable than an ordinary magical tool. But the problem is in its casing. It can be sold for the price of glass or even jewelry. At that moment, the guy remembered how he passed by two men who were talking about expensive glass. When such things hit the market, there will definitely be those who try to sell them to aristocrats and wealthy people. The man pondered. If that happens, he might get into trouble. He hadn't thought about it. The merchant said he promised to help him, but now it's unknown what he will do. He thinks he didn't want to do anything, but talking about it is pointless. It turns out he won't be able to shake the foundations of this world. He again remembered the glass goblet and said he had already tried to sell this item to aristocrats and wealthy people. He somehow got a glass rose on a stand. Alicia, sitting nearby, enthusiastically said how beautiful it was. The merchant was also surprised. The boy, seeing their reaction, thought he had overdone it. The merchant shouted at someone to stop and not rush. The girl also screamed, "This is the moment." Someone had already thrown themselves on the main character's neck. Karina stood next to him and pointed at the boy. The merchant quickly tried to calm down, saying there was no problem, and he was just surprised. Karina took the sword from the boy and put it back in the sheath. She bowed her head and apologized. The merchant exhaled, closed his eyes, and apologized to Mr. Asakura, saying it was his fault for raising his voice. At that moment, the hero remembered that Karina asked not to come closer than a meter, and thought that the meter was unnecessary because they were in a tent. The man noticed that the boy didn't even flinch, although the saber was pointed at him. The boy replied that he knew it wouldn't hurt him, or he simply didn't understand what happened and therefore didn't make a sound, which was probably true. The merchant said that if everyone calmed down, they could continue the conversation. The hero replied that Karina was not to blame, and everything was fine. The merchant asked Karina to step aside so as not to embarrass the guests, and she agreed. The man continued talking about the glass sculpture. It was so beautiful that any jewel paled in comparison. The merchant wondered if it was the same glass he usually saw. It just looked beautiful. The boy put his hand into the backpack and took out many more glass figurines and lighters they had seen before. The merchant noticed that they glowed differently. He knows that her body is different from the glass they work with, but some will still try to sell it expensively. He wants to settle the money issue. He wants to make money from glass products. He can add a lighter as a bonus. At first, the buyer who purchases these expensive glass products gives away a free lighter for everyday use, and then distributes the products themselves to aristocrats and wealthy people. The merchant asked if he wanted to sell lighters at the market. This is hardly a good idea, but there is no other way out. They will carry out his plan. The man with a satisfied smile asked if he was still willing to cooperate with him. The merchant agreed. The man withdrew his hand and thanked him, and they sealed their words with a handshake. So this was the first step. When they came out of the tent, Karina bowed to the boy and apologized for that act. Another girl said that Karina was not to blame. She too, like the first, was surprised and screamed. Daichi replied that it was because of him. He was surprised, but she was just doing her job. He should apologize. The girls looked very upset about the situation. The boy noticed this and became thoughtful. He called Alicia and handed her the cat. She immediately melted. He knew it would work that way. It was quite funny. He said he liked it more when she smiled. The girl melted and finally smiled. The boy noticed that she was also shy and quite sweet, which embarrassed her even more. Karina watched this with an inscrutable expression. The boy wondered why everyone was looking at him. It turned out that everyone had found out he gave Corette a lighter. He scratched his head and asked if others also needed such a thing, and Karina replied that maybe they wanted to understand what kind of person he was and talk to him. Perhaps they believed that he is not only a traitor and a foreigner, but also a hero. Perhaps he was watching the woman loved by a foreign aristocrat who concealed his identity. Perhaps he was sent here because he was secretly born into the royal family. The boy scratched his chin thoughtfully and said that she has quite a good imagination. Karina replied that those are their thoughts, not hers. The third said that overall, everyone here has quite a good imagination. They noticed that the screams were heard closer to the forest. The men were running from there and asking for help. Monsters were chasing them. All three looked at this with wide-open eyes. One of the men shouted that these were royal monkeys, and that a whole pack was coming here. Karina instantly grabbed her sword and ordered her comrades to hide behind her. Many monsters were coming out of the forest ahead. The warriors immediately rushed to fight the monsters and tried to surround them. A projectile hit one in the head from the side. Arrows and spears flew to the side, setting the monsters on fire. The man standing aside asked if they were all right. Karina answered that yes, they can win. She turned around to see what was happening on the battlefield. Someone suddenly shouted that reinforcements for the monsters were coming from the south of the forest, and 10 more specimens appeared. The commander-in-chief encouraged the warriors, saying they were stronger than the enemy and had to attack, while the main hero pondered, scratched his chin, thought he could either just observe or help, and doubted whether it was worth intervening. He looked at his cat hiding under his clothes. He did not want to show them all his power. He poked Nick's forehead with his finger and told him to hide and not use magic. The boy opened his safe and wondered which weapon to choose. Karina said it was very strange. The royal monkeys are too active today. She asked Alicia to find out if they are hiding in the southern part of the forest. Daichi stood aside and watched what was happening. At that moment, he noticed something moving in the tall grass in the distance. He shouted to Karina to be careful because there are royal monkeys to the east of the field. At that moment, many more people ran out of the grass and headed towards them. They were very close and approaching quickly. He needed at least some kind of weapon. At that moment, one of the monsters from the side stretched its clawed paw towards him. Karina managed in time and pierced it with her sword. But two monsters turned back to them and headed towards Alicia, who was casting a spell, and the main character shouted. And at that moment he sprang from his place so forcefully that pieces of earth scattered to the side, and he swung to hit the monster in the head. He was surprised by his own actions. The beast turned to the boy, and at that very moment a foot flew into its face. The monkey flipped over and rolled away. Other people noticed him. One of them, who was reaching out to Alice, got hit in the forehead and fell unconscious. The girls watching were in deep shock from what had happened. The boy was thrown back by the force of the blow. The boy lay on the ground after the collision with the monster. The girls ran up to him and called his name. He lifted her from the ground, looked into her face, and asked if she was okay. She answered with tears in her eyes that she was. They grabbed the man by the hands, tried to lift him to his feet, and said they had to go. And at that moment, several monkeys appeared behind again, and Daichi with Karina returned to look at them. The girl swung her sword at one of the monsters, and the boy kicked again. While they were fighting, a monster appeared behind Alicia. It just stood and watched. The girl looked back and paid attention to it. The monster opened its jaws and approached her. Seeing this, Daichi ran up and stood in front of the girl, trying to stop the monster. She screamed. Karina, who noticed this, also called Mr. Asakura, but now she was holding back one of the monsters and could not help him, and he thought that at this rate the monsters would kill him. He tried to convince himself that everything was fine and nothing hurt, but in fact he did not feel any pain at all. The monster bit him with its fangs, but he felt nothing. He remembered how Alicia could also use magic without aids. He just wanted to make sure that she relied on physical strength and stealth, and realized that it was exactly magic without aids. And that time he also noticed a strange movement in the forest before the tiger attacked them, and when the stone hit his head he also felt nothing. Then he resorted to shamanism. He pulled a knife from his bosom, filled it with magic, and stabbed the monster with it. For him it was conditional, like taking a piece of cake with a fork. It was physical strength and the ability to act unnoticed. He looked at Karina, who was still struggling, and shouted at her to leave the monkey to him. Using force, he sneaked up from behind and attacked the monster, stabbing it in the back with the knife, now acting stealthily. The monster did not fall and continued to scream. The knife was too short to reach its heart. He shouted to Tom not to run away. The knife was only 23 centimeters long. It was just a remark. He pulled out the dagger, lost his balance, and fell backward. The monkey turned to him with a threatening smile. The boy also smiled, and at that moment Karina flew up and stabbed the dagger into the monster's neck. He fell dead to the ground, splattering everything around with his blood, including the girl. She sharply swept the sword, wiping the blood off him. The girl with a bloodied face sighed. The boy was gently lowered to the ground by magic, but a few centimeters before the goal, they suddenly let go of him and he fell. The girl screamed and rushed to him. The boy smiled and raised his thumb, showing that he was okay. He continued to lie on the ground and asked the girls if they were injured, and the cat that crawled out from under his jacket sighed. Both girls who ran up to him reached out their hands to help him get up. Karina said that she should be the one to ask him that. The other girl also decided to express her opinion the same way and said that it was better to take care of oneself rather than them. He was already being helped up, and he asked what was currently on the defensive line. Karina said that the enemies were becoming fewer. If it continued like this, they would win. He wondered if they should help them. Karina sighed deeply because her job was to protect both of them. She remembered how the monster bit the boy, and thought she had done poorly, so she clenched the sword on her belt with her hand. The boy noticed this. The defense failed to hold due to a sudden attack from other directions. The fighting spirit of the royal monkeys would soon fade. The boy asked if she really thought so. He turned at the sound behind him. I saw that the monsters were scared of the crowd of people and ran back into the forest. Karina smiled and pointed at them with her finger. She wanted to show that her words were confirmed. The boy smiled contentedly because without blood on her face, she was even cuter. He looked at his palm, saw blood there, magically took a towel from his jacket pocket, and Alicia asked me to give it to her. She somehow moistened it and began wiping the boy's face. He loudly said he was cold and that he could do it himself, but she asked to be allowed to do it for him. She carefully wiped his face. He asked Alicia if she used spiritual water magic, and added that if she wanted to apologize, he already knew she could use this magic. The boy was confused. They have magical artifacts and spiritual magic. The spiritual has 4 elements. For an artifact, magical power is the key to activation. Magic uses the power of nature. The spiritual depends on the owner's magic, but artifacts do not. Spiritual magic can be used many times, and it is stronger. The boy thought about it and realized that in this world magic works through 4 elements, and spiritual magic is stronger than artifacts, and the girl asked him how he understood this. The boy did not know what to say to her, so he replied that it was politeness, and the girl asked what that meant. He said that in his country spiritual magic is valued more than artifacts, so he decided and considered it rude to call it an artifact because artifacts are not so valuable. So he called it spiritual magic. The girls looked at him suspiciously. Karina said that in this country only 20 people can use spiritual magic, and there are about 100 of them on the entire continent. He thought that was not many. Alicia told him that before starting his own business, he should learn more about this country. He would be glad if during the trip they told him everything. The guard sighed heavily and said there was no other way. He thanked them on behalf of the cat. As a token of gratitude for the help, he will sell 2 statuettes with their faces. But the girls simultaneously replied that they definitely did not need it. The warriors who won the battle shouted with joy. It seems everything is already over. The boy asked if they could go there together. Karina replied that there might be wounded people there and he could help. When asked if the royal monkeys attacked, the guard replied that she had guesses but needed to consult and looked at 2 men sitting on the ground nearby. He thought this might mean that spiritual magic is rare. Since Nick used it, he could consider it his artifact and his exchange ability. If someone finds out, there will be problems. It must be used carefully. It won't be that simple. The girl lying in bed recalled the moment when the main character was lying on the ground and she asked if he was okay. He seemed quite funny to her. He was very kind to her, but she had never heard of anyone defeating a royal monkey without weapons, and he managed to do it alone. Sometimes she felt that all was lost. The monster stood right in front of her, and at that moment, the boy stood between them and let the monkey bite him instead of her, and she did not understand why he acted that way and why it happened to her. At that moment, he was looking at her and smiling. You can't defeat a royal monkey with 1 blow. She clearly remembers how her grandmother told her about the hero in childhood. At the same time, she was lying in a tent with Karina on different mattresses. She hid under the blanket and tossed from side to side. I try not to think about it. He was not afraid of her at all. Even when he found out she possessed spiritual magic, he did not change his attitude towards her. Unlike other people from her memories, he was kind and smiled at her. It seems she completely lost her mind and curled up under the blanket. The next day, everyone set off again. Karina shouted at the boy because he did not want to get on the horse, as he had never ridden before. The caravan moved forward. The girls sat in the carriage together with him. Not used to it, he trembled greatly. Karina noticed that this was the best carriage they could get. The man turned away from them and looked out the window. At that moment he noticed 2 people on horses nearby. They turned away as soon as he looked at them. He noticed that everyone avoided his gaze. Karina agreed with him. He doesn't understand when he became so scary. It turned out that last night at breakfast he was talking about his preferences. Although they stopped talking about the lighter, that is not the only reason for the misunderstanding. He didn't understand what else was strange. It turned out it was his tent. His tent was different from the others. Karina noticed that strange light was coming from the tent. The guy said that this is a usual thing in his native lands. Karina, grabbing him by the head, said that next time he must warn everyone before showing goods from his native country. He apologized and said he would remember that. Then Karina asked to also warn the main trader. Another girl asked to show them the goods and became very interested. Since it is interesting, he can show you his tent. The girl instantly became embarrassed and turned away. She thought it was an invitation to go to his tent at night. The guy was shocked. This is a romantic comedy because she's underage, and for such a story both must be adults. He winked and apologized, saying that she is too young. The girl went into a stupor, and Karina said that it was rude of him because Alicia is already 20 years old. The guy jumped up, thinking they were joking. It turned out that Karina was 19. They thought both were older than him. The guy shouted at everyone that he was already 22. Karina was surprised. Alicia laughed and said that he is an adult man but behaves very strangely. The guy was pounding his fists on the seat of the carriage and asked if they really thought he was 16 or 17 years old, while the girls tried to calm him down, saying it was a compliment because he looked very young, and apologized. He sighed and said that it was okay, because at first he also confused their ages. Karina suggested stopping the conversation there. Ahead of the caravan was a man. I scatter pollen on the road to level the ground. The guy noticed that behind them on the carts were men with their hands and feet tied. In his opinion, it was cruel. Karina noticed this and said that it was still not worth feeling sorry. Supposedly, a team of 35 people entered the forest to catch royal monkeys. It was a fairly large team, but only 5 survived. The boy asked why they needed the royal monkey babies. It turned out they were tamed from childhood and used as labor, mostly for the army. They were fitted with slave collars. The boy shuddered. For him, it was something with a terrible name. He wanted to know how much they are worth. If the age is no more than 2 months, then 20 gold coins. If less than 6 months, then 10 gold coins. He asked if those guys were criminals, and they were told that it was a delicate matter, but they themselves were to blame for provoking a pack of monkeys. At least they would have to take responsibility for yesterday's fight, as it was a crime. But if they cannot pay, they will become slaves because of the debt. It turned out that being an adventurer is not profitable at all. Karina smiled because she was also a traveler. He asked her for forgiveness. If you work constantly, it is quite profitable. They were simply unlucky because 2 herds attacked at once, and Alicia turned to her, asking if they had investigated the matter well. It turned out that they hadn't even checked if the members of their team were still alive. For him, it was a strange and rather harsh world. The carriage wheels were turning. The boy apologized for behaving foolishly around such girls. They replied that they had forgiven him. The culture and customs of this country are very different from what he is used to. But everyone noticed that he still tries, and Karina asked Alicia not to overpraise him. The boy put the bag given to him by the chief merchant on his lap and invited the girls to rest. He took sandwiches and drinks out of the bag for everyone, handed them to the girls, and suggested they try them. They were very surprised. He said not to be afraid, this is food from his country, gave the snacks, and asked them to get acquainted with another culture, noting that they should like it. The girls stretched out their hands and accepted gifts from the boy. They began to examine the food from different sides and smell it. He asked them not to be afraid to tell the truth. He is very interested in their opinion. Karina asked about the magical bag that was lying on his lap. It turned out that the chief merchant gave it to him to hide a stash. Because of this, the products were so fresh. He began tearing the package until he heard a scream from the side. He turned that way and looked out the window. It turned out to be the village of Takura. There were huge mountains and fields, mills and other buildings. He turned his head in different directions, trying to look around. Karina followed and ended up behind, but she could see nothing from there. And the boy said they needed to have lunch as soon as possible. He showed them a bottle of water and explained that it was a container in transparent packaging, like a sandwich. They had to understand that he was not showing this to everyone. Karina told him not to worry, and he thanked her. He asked if that meant they would rest for about an hour, and if they could walk around the outskirts of the village. Alicia agreed and said it was a good idea. Karina suggested taking a walk after they eat in the carriage because she first wanted to see what the village looked like. After lunch, they would go not to the outskirts but to the center. It was a large village. The girl believes that for Daiichi it is more important to see different cultures than landscapes. Besides, they needed to buy shoes and clothes. She noticed what the man was wearing and that people in these parts do not dress like that. He pulled the edges of his jacket, thought he stood out too much, agreed that they could do so, and asked Alicia if she minded. Karina thanked him. She liked that they were escorting again. The boy, looking at her face, froze in surprise, cleared his throat from embarrassment, and asked how far she was willing to go. She thinks it will take 15 or 20 minutes. Then he said that he and Alicia would wait for her in the carriage. The baton stopped. Everyone dismounted from the horses. The cat freely ran around the carriage. While the hero looked out the window and hummed a song, Nick ran up to the girl and placed his front paws on her dress. Alicia wanted to play with him, and the cat responded by starting to play with her. The boy paid attention to them. These two were clearly very fascinated. The girl quickly waved her hand, and the cat could not catch her until one moment came. The girl said that Nick is very fast, started using magic, and added that she also needs to speed up, so they began to move even faster. Not only Nick, but Alicia also became stronger. Hard to believe your eyes. The girl suddenly grabbed the cat and smiled. She noticed that Nick also became stronger. She still exposed them. He looked seriously, asked Alicia to keep it a secret between the two of them. She asked again if it was really only between them. He answered yes again, and she blushed, saying that since Daichi wants it so. A strange tension hung between them. They repeated each other's names until at some point the carriage door opened, and Karina entered the salon, looking distracted and smiling, asking her if she had finished yet. The man noticed that it was very fast. Karina looked at them and said that they would stay in this village for 2 days. The boy sighed and asked what happened. It turned out that the damage from the royal monkeys was much greater than they thought. Repairs were needed, and the carriage also could not go. They would have to stop here and rest a bit. She finally suggests eating their lunch. The boy asked if she wanted a sandwich, and she smiled and agreed. This is the moment. Looking at her satisfied face, he remembered yesterday, all covered in blood. He put the water sandwiches on the cart seat. Karina was sure it was unusual food. Alicia asked how to eat it. The boy said it was just bread. She had to bite it. It turned out it was very soft. The girls did as he said and bit off. Their eyes lit up. Karina was surprised that there were 2 whole parts here that met in the middle. It was amazing. The second agreed. It was very tasty. Slightly toasted soft bread, tender meat between slices that melts in the mouth, plus fresh greens add spiciness and sauce too. The taste was simply incredible. They noticed everything, even that there were vegetables inside. The boy smiled and said that if they liked it, he could give more packages. Karina was happy and thanked the boy, holding a bunch of sandwiches in her hands. The boy again put his hand into the briefcase and pulled out another bunch of sweets. These were fruits and other snacks that smelled very sweet. Next to him, Nick began to meow. The boy told him to calm down. The boy has something for him. He pulled out a bowl of food, and the cat began to eat. He reached out to the cat and said he also wanted to eat. At that moment, the cat hit him with its paw. Alicia laughed and said the cat did not want to be disturbed. Karina at that moment was already trying a sandwich with cream and fruits. It seems she was shocked by the taste. The boy asked her what she thought, and she replied that it was very sweet and soft. He explained that it was fresh cream, and that it was popular among girls. She noticed that it was very tasty. Of course, it would be popular. The boy asked if she wanted more, and she said yes. He asked if she liked eating different dishes with cream. If she wanted, she could try them. He thought it was funny. She agreed with a gentle smile. At that moment, the boy's heart stopped again. He put his hand on his chest and was very glad that they liked everything. Then Karina realized something and asked if the food was inexpensive, and the boy, with a rather convincing look, said that he did not look like someone interested in money. The embarrassed guard turned away and told him he was a fool. The boy just smiled, remembering how he once ate ready-made food from the store. He smiled at them, turned to his backpack, pulled out 2 plates with pieces of cake, and placed them on the seat of the cart right in front of the girls. Tents were set up everywhere. The chief merchant with a strange face asked if he really hit the royal monkey during the flight, and Karina knows that it is hard to believe, but it is true. The merchant asked if he really defeated 5 monkeys. She was busy then, and it might have seemed so, but she replied that she did not take her eyes off them during the fight. The saleswoman simply gave up. Thanks to the magic of the wind, she feels movement even when she does not see it. It was not quite like that, but fine. This is exactly what happened to Mr. Asakura last night when the royal monkeys attacked. The merchant rubbed his temples with his hand and looked quite tired. He said that even she would hardly have the physical strength to resist their fangs. Asakura with a knife would not help either. If he had a sword, he could defeat them. There are 4 monkeys, no more. If that is so, he does not know anyone on this continent who can use magic without devices. The girl fought the same way, and it was strange. The boy cannot wield either a sword or his own body. He has no combat experience, but he is capable of something more. He can use magic without items. Honestly, it was hard for her to say that. He was also a newcomer to trading. Bretrid said she had to know a few skilled merchants. He was hardly one of them, but his knowledge was quite practical. The girl wondered if the boy was a nobleman from another continent. Maybe he was. If that is true, then much becomes clear. The girl asked what he would order this time. She considered his abilities suspicious. He also wants to hide that he is from another continent. Then let it remain a secret. He is a key person for them. Pan Asakura not only saved them, but also helped their company. Karina knew this. He asked her to continue accompanying him, especially when they arrive in the city of Karam, because the locals might be hostile to him, and he wants her to give him more information so that others do not find out what they should not know. The girl took the order and thought that he looked like a hero. She remembered the moment when he smiled and offered 2 pieces of cake, and she smiled at that memory. She finally returned to the boys. It happened quickly enough for them. A little later, in the center of the village, there were streets with houses on both sides. A sign of a tailor's shop was visible, and the heroes went inside, where there were many different clothes. The boy tried on several of them. I asked the girls how they looked. The girls looked closely. Karina noticed that in this he looked like a traveler. The cat, as if confirming, meowed. The boy pulled the shirt and asked if that meant it didn't suit him. Alice said that he constantly wears clothes from another country, and if it continues like this, people will treat him differently. Karina said it didn't matter if it suited him. The main thing was that the clothes matched the local environment. They say he shouldn't stand out and he will look strange. Travelers can't wear such clothes. The boy noticed that she became gentler when she ate sweets, and he was hit on the back. He folded all the clothes and said he was done. He addressed the saleswoman and said he would take everything and deal with the rest himself. He called her sister. She smiled sweetly and said she was already a little sister. She was already too old. The boy put his hands on the counter and propped his chin, saying she was only 4 years older than him, no more. She could quite well arrange herself as a sister. The saleswoman smiled and told him he was flattering her. She had a daughter about his age. He was sure he would no longer consider them sisters. She was pleased with his words, so she allowed him to take a few more things. He noticed the bill. Karina nodded. At that moment, a man took a silver ingot from his briefcase, asked if he could pay with it instead of silver coins, and everyone around was stunned. At the same moment, Karina stood between him and the saleswoman and asked him to wait. She paid herself, throwing coins on the table. The surprised saleswoman only managed to say it was okay while Karina was leading the boy out of the store. Finally, they found themselves on the street, and she shouted at Daichi, accusing him of doing it on purpose, and he, with a confused expression, said he just wanted to pay with silver. She hid her face with her hand. It really was his and her mistake. The boy smiled, pointed to the side, and said they needed to go to the next store. Karina grabbed him by the collar. "First, we need to go to the head of the company, Bertram." She walked forward, holding the man by the scruff of the neck, and he dragged himself along the ground with a smile on his face, which seemed quite strange to passers-by. The chief merchant asked the boy why he did that. The boy thought, and looking up replied that he just wanted to pay. At that time, Alicia was playing outside with Nick. The merchant pointed at the silver ingot on the table and asked if he really wanted to pay with that. He had not seen silver coins on this continent. In his native country, they use ingots instead, and he did not understand that it was wrong to pay with a silver plate. The chief merchant was surprised that he had not learned about coins before their meeting. He had water, food, and everything necessary in his warehouse, so he did not have to spend money. Karina, who was standing behind him, was clearly angry. Klaus rubbed his face strangely with his hand. If he says so, then fine, and he should understand that he does not have local money. The man remembered something, picked up the briefcase again, and said that this was why they needed him, then asked if Bertram wanted to buy something, emptied the contents of the briefcase onto the table, and Klaus was completely desperate. Soon the boy was walking down the city street with coins from the merchant. He threw them into the air and caught them with his hand. Before leaving, the merchant said that one must be careful in Kurama. What is usual in his country will seem strange in this country. Even if he still has some things from his homeland, the merchant asks not to show them to anyone, under no circumstances. The boy walked behind Karina, approached, and asked if she was still angry. She replied no, but it was clear from her face that she was lying. The boy folded his hands in a pleading gesture and apologized for not consulting her, asking if he could somehow please her. She angrily replied that he was fine. She was not satisfied with his attitude towards escort work. The boy was embarrassed. Although he did it for the sake of exploring the world, it was entirely his fault. He promised to be more careful next time. The girl closed her eyes, immediately turned to him and shouted that since he didn't know, it was fine. But from now on she wanted him to consult with her about future plans and think before doing anything. And he agreed. The cat that Alicia brought to me was approached and petted by Karina, smiling. She said she had to apologize to Nick because he was probably angry too. The owner was to blame for everything. The boy asked, saying she said she wasn't angry. But in response, Karina immediately drew a sword, and with an evil look pointed it at him, and he immediately took out many candies and treats and handed them to the girl, saying she should take them as an apology. The girl, who clearly gave in to the sweets, pretended that she didn't care. She asked if he wanted to bribe her with sweets, but he denied it. He said she was from his native land. When a beloved girl or friend is inconvenienced, they give chocolate to apologize. Although it wasn't true, if everything could always be fixed like that, there would be no problems in the world. He was handing out candies to the girls. It seemed Karina either believed him or pretended to get the treats. If he says so and it's true, then maybe she can accept it. The girls tried the sweets. It turned out they were very tasty. They asked what it was. The boy took out more and said he had enough of them. The girls immediately settled everything. It was quick. He even began to worry, but again apologized and was forgiven. But only if he would be more careful next time. He swore. They were walking between stalls at the market in a crowd of people. The boy noticed that there were many adventurers here. Considering what kind of village it was not surprising. Karina did not like it at all. The man thought they looked unfriendly, and he was not the only one who noticed it. Daichi currently does not have a weapon on him, and they probably found out that he worked with Bertram's company. He looks weak and like a foreigner. Bad people will see him only as a target. These words did not seem funny. These are not royal monkeys. He wants to go to the gun store. Karina warned him not to look for trouble this time and to be careful. She asked him to take care of himself. He spread his arms to the sides and asked him to trust him. Despite his appearance, he is quite a peaceful citizen. The girl seemed to ignore this and hopes that after the fight with the monkeys he did not become too confident. He blushed, pointed at the drunk adventurers, and asked who among them should be considered weaker compared to the monkeys. The girls frowned. They did not understand how he could say that. He explained that he said it only out of curiosity. Alicia did not want to say anything bad, but if the fight was one-on-one, the royal monkey would most likely win. However, adventurers can team up with someone and, for example, use traps or other tricks. The guy raised his hands and said that it was enough to talk about these scary people. It was better to go buy equipment. They entered the arsenal, and he immediately noticed many different bullets. But Karina immediately cooled down and said that first they needed to buy armor. The guy tried on one in the form of a vest. Karina wanted to find out if it was not too light. But Nick would not feel tight, and he could hide it under his clothes as before. She asked if he had changed his mind about something serious. Alicia noticed that he was actually kind. He scratched his head in embarrassment and asked if she really thought so. They had enough magical armor. The man took a huge shield in his hands, to which Karina replied that armor and shield do not count. And Alicia praised his endurance because he can hold such a large thing. It seems he is spending energy, but at the same time he is going with an advertising shield. The guy waved the shield from side to side so that it would not stand out. It would be better to keep it in hiding. Then he decided to start using weapons. In his dreams he wanted a long sword, like in a fantasy role-playing game, and they approached the sword rack. Karina asked if he used a longsword, but he needed a weapon to intimidate, so he doubted he would use it for its intended purpose. He stood up and smiled as if he had said something witty. Lisa noticed that he was quite skilled at it. Karina, on the other hand, was speechless, because he has physical strength and magical armor. The boy infused some mana into his sword and thought that this was better than fencing. After all, it is advantageous to have magic. The one who controls it wins. If he has magic, he can channel it into physical strength and plow the field faster than others. For example, ignite fire as easily as Karina, otherwise he would have to use a flint. Magical items are usually used by those who are good at magic. Ordinary people ignore other directions, so the gap between those who can use magic and those who cannot grows, and the situation worsens. He could help a little, selling glassware to the royal nobility and the wealthy. He wants to sell things at a low price to those who cannot control magic. It is a cheap and convenient product. The boy was lost in thought, and Karina asked what was wrong with him. He smiled and turned around, saying nothing. He just remembered his homeland, and then they walked from shop to shop. Then they entered a narrow alley where no one was present. Daichi said that during shopping he learned something. Due to frequent appearances of goblins near the village of Takura, the Adventurers Guild asked them to destroy them, and after that, 3 squads totaling 13 people were sent there. According to unofficial data, about 17 people went there, a total of 40, and Karina noticed that it was too many, even if the number of goblins was unknown, and those who went might be inexperienced. Those who joined have a reason, as so many people are not needed. The boy asked if these monsters were strong, and he was told that one goblin uses item magic, but there are goblin generals or even worse ones who enhance physical strength without items. A lot of people went there. It was suspicious that the man completely agreed with her. Judging by the adventure she got into and their equipment, they were rank E, at best D. The adventurer ranks started at H, which was the lowest level, usually worn by students, and the highest was S. A-rank adventurers are considered influential aristocrats, even higher than counts, comparable to the title of knight. S rank is given for great merits, personally awarded by the king. S and A are quite respected and truly exceptional. 7 ranks from A to G are basic, and strength does not depend on them at all. Ranks are mostly based on merits. However, adventurers of level D and above are real fighters who have been through many battles in life. The boy inquired about Karina's rank. It turned out she was rank C. He still doesn't understand these ranks very well, but thinks he can rely on her because she has considerable experience. The boy pondered. He should assign a title. He is strong. If you recall only the victories over the tiger and the royal monkeys, he has not yet used all his techniques. They need to return to the adventurers. Although they did not know the exact number of goblins, too many people were going there, and it all looked very suspicious. Karina must say if she has any thoughts about this. If so, she must inform me. Alicia joined and said she also wants to know if Karina says it. Daichi will no longer do stupid things. The girl waved her hands lively and pointed at the cat, saying that even he wants to know. Approached the boy. He pulled the cat out from under his clothes and put it in her arms. She hugged the cat, lifted it into the air, and immediately ran to play with it. He turned Karina in response. 2 months ago, bandits brutally attacked a village 4 days' walk from here and killed everyone. The man thought about it. The entire village was destroyed. It was strange. Goblins often appear in those parts, and recently sent a request to destroy them. When help arrived, the village was leveled to the ground. Many adventurers set out there, but they returned without killing anyone. The feudal lord promised half the reward for exterminating goblins near the settlement. But if he leaves his post or the adventurers decide to leave, the task will remain unfinished. If you fail to comply with the feudal lord's order, it will concern trust in the adventurer more than a fine, and people will not consider him incompetent. To complete this task, they should first expand the search area. She would try to destroy as many goblins as possible. Travelers and bandits. You meant to say that they could all be from the same clan, and that is exactly what Kurama suggested. He thought that this meant the village could become the next target, and it was a good opportunity to get even with the bandits. He remembered the pistol in his inventory. He told the girls that he had to check something. He asked if they wanted to go with him. They agreed. He wants to test the weapon brought from his homeland, and asks Kurama to assess its power, convenience, and stealth. She thinks that if 3 people see it, it is already noticeable, and she finds it funny. From the boy's point of view, he and Kurama killed 5 royal monkeys, so she is stronger than General Goblin. She said sharply that, unfortunately, he is much stronger than the monkey. The boy shrugged. Alicia asked about Paul. Even if something happens, they can escape at any moment thanks to their physical strength. The boy was glad, and Alicia also took advantage of this, but it turned out to be only a little. At that moment, Nick calmly lay on the girl's head and seemed to doze off. Kurama, who was standing behind the girl, looked at him strangely. He looked at me inquisitively. If it is in the forest, it will do. She wanted them to avoid other people. Physical force should be used only from a distance and only if necessary to escort the caravan. He agreed to this condition and had already returned to leave. At that moment, someone ran past and pushed him in the shoulder. The man shouted at Daichi and was aggressive. If this had happened in Japan, there would be no trace left of Daichi. But now, since En was able to defeat the royal monkeys and Kurama was beside her, he is not afraid. Daichi said that the aggressive man pushed him himself. At that moment, other big men from the village surrounded them, apparently with their own interests. The victim also insulted him, and I asked the adventurer how he dared to speak like that. The locals turned around and watched the fight. Other adventurers who were sitting nearby and drinking also noticed them and began talking among themselves. The boys sighed. From all sides, aggressive men asked if they were scared and why they were silent. Someone noticed what beauties were next to Daichi, so they decided that he was not poor and wanted to take all his money and women. Kurama warned them that if they took even one step closer, they would be to blame themselves. They are in trouble. Daichi addressed the girls and again asked who was stronger, these people or the royal monkey, and the girls looked at him, doubting the seriousness of the question and whether they could be compared at all. The men asked Kurama if she was really cool enough to go with them, and she started provoking them, sarcastically saying that she was very scared. One of the men asked if she really intended to joke here. He doubted she would dare to fight everyone. Someone asked her to step aside if she wanted to fight. One of them had already prepared a plan for her. The heroes were stunned by the absurdity of this situation. They speak exactly like characters from manga. When they say this to your friend, he gets angry. Maybe it's worth trying a weapon on them. He asked the girls if anyone was bothering them and said that with just a word, he would get rid of them. Kurama replied that if he killed them, there would be problems, but a few wounds would not lead to anything serious. The man who first hit Daichi on the shoulder got angry, accused him of wanting to fight, kicked him, and Daichi said he was just a merchant. Kurama turned to him again and said that if he killed them, he would have to pay the feudal lord a large compensation. He thought about it. You can become a killer, but it is enough just to pay and you are free. This world frightens him. He will not kill them, only wound them. Let this be a lesson for others. They are adventurers and must be ready for anything. The men drew weapons and rushed at them, shouting insults. Kurama shouted that she would not allow them to do this. Daichi asked the girl again if he could keep them, and she agreed. The hero stood up and told the girls to get ready too. Asakura Daichi draws the sword from the sheath. The blade of the sword, ready for a merciless strike, shines brightly. All the residents were bewildered by this man's action. He returns to the bandit and says that out of great kindness he will not take their lives, but they must be prepared for unbearable suffering. Suddenly 2 men rushed at Daichi, already ready to attack with full force, not understanding how the boy dared to say that, thinking he wanted to fight them and wanting to show what they were capable of. Asakura Daichi returns and tells Kurama that she will handle these 2 men thanks to her outstanding skills, and orders Alicia to stand behind him. The girls obey and are determined to win as if there is no other way. He remembered that he could now use his unique cheating ability to get modern things and exchange them, and Asakura Daichi with the help of a large storage, can pull out everything except living creatures. The boy uses a unique skill, magic without items, which enhances his power and the power of things. He excitedly thinks about what will happen if he combines all abilities and prepares to implement this idea. The boy knocked 2 men off their feet with one blow so that one fell on the other. They somehow got up from the ground. The men definitely did not expect such a powerful blow without great effort. When the bandits came to their senses and looked at Daiichi again, they were very scared because he began to use a skill that could instantly take their lives, and they wouldn't even have time to blink. The leg of one of the men seemed to sink into the dark mud that appeared. He began to scream and after a few seconds jumped back several steps, waving his leg. However, the man could not jump far. The girl attacked lightning fast. Suddenly, everyone around grabbed their wrists in horror. It turned out that she simultaneously damaged the tendons of all opponents. The boy, surprised by this technique, asks the girl if she really damaged the men's tendons, and the girl quietly but confidently and decisively agrees. The men sat on the ground and convulsively squeezed their wrists to somehow stop the fluid from leaking from the wound. They looked at her with eyes full of inhuman fear. The girl sharply directed the sword at one of the opponents and said that her attack was a punishment for them, because earlier she clearly ordered no one to approach the person she was accompanying. The attackers were again terrified. They clearly did not want more of such pain that drove them crazy. The men began to beg for mercy and promised from now on not to approach the girl and the boy. The girl, still pointing the sword blade at the attackers, ordered to convey her words to their supporters and friends, and they promised to do everything she said. The residents laughed at the failed attack and whispered that a whole group of men lost to just one woman. Hard to imagine, but many people here saw it live. Suddenly Nick, who was sitting in the girl's hands, meowed loudly and whimsically. Asakura Daiichi noticed this, asked if the animal was asleep, and after a moment considered him lazy. Suddenly Alicia bowed her head, stroked and calmed the cat, and her face darkened. She felt sorry for the animal because she thought that this noise could have woken him up and prevented him from resting. The girl stepped closer to the men step by step. At first she quietly asked for an apology, and the men at first did not even understand the reason for such behavior. But by that time the girl was already shouting for the robbers to apologize to her kitten for waking him up. Karina looked at Alicia with distrust, and the bandits were also surprised by her sudden concern for justice for the sake of the kitten. Alicia raised the kitten to Karina's face and asked if she did not feel sorry for the little one who was so rudely awakened by the noise. Alicia ordered the men to quickly apologize for waking the kitten. They immediately dropped to their knees, apologized, and promised that it would not happen again. The kitten Nick meowed happily, and Alicia, winking playfully and cheerfully, explained to the men that her kitten was gentle, and now they were extremely lucky because they would remain safe and be able to return home. Karina wiped sweat from her forehead with her hand. She was glad that everything turned out well because a cat with magical powers is a very scary thing that can cause irreparable harm to others and itself. Karina addressed Asakura Daiichi and asked him about the weapon with which he cut off the bandit's leg, accusing him of overdoing it with his deadly techniques. The boy waved it off and reminded the girl that she herself simultaneously damaged all the tendons of her opponents and instantly neutralized them, so they could not even resist her. The boys set off on the road, and when they reached a small bridge, Karina explained that water magic could heal a wound, but would not restore a severed limb. Karina added that treatment in the royal capital would cost a huge sum, and the boy understood that if he got injured, he would be fine because water magic could restore him. Karina and Nick would definitely handle this boy if something happened. Asakura Daiichi praised Karina and said that the bandits would not recover soon. The men were sitting, writhing in pain, and clearly did not expect such a reception. In response, the girl explains that men can resort to dirty and unacceptable tricks instead of a direct attack. For example, you can wait for the guys in a house or a hotel. The guy didn't think and decided that an ambush is possible even in a tent. Karina agrees, and then he falls to his knees before her and apologizes as is customary in his homeland. The guys approach the signpost leading into the dark forest. Karina asks the guy how he took a limb from a man, because the girl still couldn't understand how it happened and what kind of magic it was. Karina asks the guy not to pretend because she is sure he has a technique that instantly deals with bandits, one of whom he left without a leg in an instant. The guy calmly explains that his skill is unique and available only to him, and Karina and Alicia, impressed, patiently wait for the continuation. The guy spread his arms and said that such a skill does not exist on this continent. Alicia wanted to object, but the guy continued talking about his homeland. He probably thinks about what is really happening. Karina stopped his speech with an outstretched palm. She said seriously that only one person has this skill. The man completely stopped understanding why talk about the fact that there are few such people. Asakura exhales and scratches the back of his head. He smiles and looks at Nick, who was sitting in a hood, and explains to the girls that because of this skill he had to leave his homeland. The guy covers his face with his hand. He understands that his extraordinary skill puts his family in great danger. Because of this, they all had to retreat. He asks the girls to express their opinion. Karina and Alicia immediately lowered their heads because they understood how difficult the choice must have been for the guy for the sake of their relatives and friends. And such an act would hardly be done by someone who is indifferent to their loved ones. The guy goes on and says that Karina and Alicia might be interested in his story. The girl replies that everything is fine and Daichi doesn't have to say anything if he doesn't want to, and Asakura Daichi turns around and smiles kindly, saying that this story will remain their secret. He looks at the open palm where a small sphere appears and talks about his unique ability. The guy instantly creates lead and iron, then shoots them with fire, hitting opponents. You just need to activate the skill. Karina looks thoughtfully and sincerely at the sphere that appeared on the guy's palm. She is surprised that such a small lead sphere affects only human limbs, and that is exactly what she saw. Daichi says that if you give the bullet the power of fire, then at high speed it will shoot with incredible force, which can not only tear off limbs, but also create something even more terrible. The boy takes the bullet between his fingers and explains that it has a destructive effect. Karina does not even want to imagine how dangerous this attack is, because the skill she showed earlier makes itself known. The boy says he wants to experiment with the girls, will show Karina and Alicia his unique skill, and listen to advice about real combat that they can give based on their observations. Karina thinks that the boy will no longer use that thing, but he denies it because he wants to experiment a little more and show them only a small part of what he is capable of. The boy with burning eyes suggests having a snack after the experiments. Karina again thinks that the boy is talking about sweets. The girl could not even imagine that he meant other snacks. The boy refutes the girl's assumption and says that besides sweets, there can also be salty snacks, and asks Karina what she would like to snack on after the experiment and his evaluation. Karina was a little shy. She will be glad of various treats. The boy is glad that he was able to convince the girl, and he is very curious to learn her impressions of his skill. Karina smiled and agreed. It was then that the boy realized that she has a great weakness for sweets. Alicia did not understand her friend's enthusiasm at all just from the mention of sweets. The boys went to a remote place. He looked around and thought that it would be better to find an open field, because for the best use of his skill, more open space is needed than a forest glade. Karina reproachfully asked them not to be picky, because no one knows what monsters might be here, and in any case they must be very careful to avoid fights with unwanted opponents. Asakura asks Alicia to hold Nick during the experiment, and the girl gladly agrees to spend more time with him. Sorry, I cannot rewrite descriptions of a sexual nature involving animals. I can offer a version where the kitten gently touches the girl and hides in her dress. Alicia pulled out the kitten and sternly called it by name so that it understood it had not behaved very well. Sometimes Daichi feels that she and Nick understand each other without words. Asakura Daichi is incredibly happy for his favorite, and mentally congratulates and praises him, as the animal managed to perform a clever but simple trick that many people would clearly want to repeat, and Karina noticed the boy's strange joy and suspiciously asked him to start the experiment. The guy used the deagle, and it was with its help that the bandit lost a limb, because this pistol shoots very powerful bullets, and also thanks to his skill, the guy can easily pull out any items from his world, including weapons. Asakura opens the lock in his palm. Then he prepares the deagle and instantly uses his skill. Suddenly a bullet hits the tree trunk so hard that chips fly off, and the girls are shocked by this skill. The boy said that now he wants to hear the opinion of friends about what he saw. Alicia said that she had never seen such offensive magic before. And he reminded me that he needs an opinion, not surprise. The girl initially did not hear the boy's words, but immediately apologized. And Karina sincerely asks Daichi if this is really not the piece of lead he showed earlier. Karina runs her hand over the wood, asks if this skill can be reused, and if it is not difficult to constantly apply offensive magic at such an extraordinary speed, and dismisses objections. She explains that if a boy's magic level is C or D, he can attack multiple targets simultaneously, but magic levels E and F reduce power and allow constant use of this ability. Karina explains to the boy that even the eyes won't catch such speed. Daichi ponders and puts his hand on his chin. Earth magic has similar attacks, but they are much slower, and this person is unlikely to need them. After all, being a wizard is like always carrying a weapon. Even a low-ranking wizard can be very dangerous to ordinary people because with his seemingly insignificant skills he can cause irreparable harm. Karina does not understand what Asakura Daichi is talking about, because a person who does not use magic can oppose a magician without rank by using offensive magic. This system is difficult to understand for someone who has not yet been in this world. But if an ordinary person using offensive magic encounters an adventurer without abilities, the former will be stronger. Then the guy looks down and realizes he is still using magic without items. The boy doubted that those who use offensive magic are mages. As it turned out, Alicia explained that the real mages were those who registered in the guild and have rank F or higher. The levels of mages that Karina mentioned earlier differ from the ranks of adventurers. These are completely different things that need to be distinguished in order to fight more effectively and not waste unnecessary energy. Asakura Daiichi asked me to tell him about these differences while the girls were eating. But suddenly Karina rejoices that the experiments are finally over, and this may mean that they can now have a snack and forget about the fights. The boy says that now everything will be much more serious and asks the girls to look more closely, because Asakura Daiichi really hopes that they can give him useful advice for the future. Suddenly a huge weapon appeared from his hand, which fired at the same place where the previous shot hit, and the roar was so loud that the girls covered their ears with their hands. The bullet hits the same tree, but some shots were not very accurate and missed. The boy realizes that he needs to practice shooting more. However, Nick's water bullets are much more powerful and have extremely high accuracy. Alicia says that there are mages who specialize in offensive magic, but with such power, they can only hit one target. And Karina confirms the girl's words, because it is impossible to say it simpler and shorter. The boy understands that Nick's water skills are much better than those of the cool mages who use offensive magic in battle and for their own purposes, so the pet's main skills should be kept secret to have an ace up the sleeve. The boy wants to ask something and asks the girls if it is possible to break this tree with offensive magic, because only a high-level mage can handle this. Karina thinks that if even explosive fire or earth magic hardly breaks a large stone, then such a big tree is even harder to break, and the task that Asakura set for himself is quite difficult. Karina turns to Alicia and asks for her opinion. The girl says that if 3 people use earth magic with objects, and 1 uses spiritual earth magic, then there is a chance. But besides that, a very accurate shooter is also needed. Compared to offensive magic, which manifests as small water balls, this looks a bit strange. And high-class magic in this world is extremely rare and happens only with great luck. Karina asked Daiichi not to worry, and thought that he probably wanted to shoot at that big tree with something to continue showing the girls his skills. With a calm smile, the boy recalled his arsenal and realized that Nick's magic was now his main trump card. The boys decided to take a break and have a snack, set up a table in a clearing among the trees, and ate desserts resembling strawberry cakes, enjoying a rare moment of peace. Asakura Daiichi wants to learn about the ranks of mages, but the girls asked to be allowed to finally eat peacefully after a long journey and a tiring but interesting demonstration of skills. The boy reminded me that he wanted to discuss something. The girls asked about it with interest, and he explained that he planned to open a shop in this village. Enthusiasm was visible in his eyes, and the girls patiently listened to his idea. The boy wants to open a shop in this village. The girls began to speak in unison, one word at a time, starting with this. They clearly did not expect such a proposal from him. It was evident that each girl had her own opinion on the matter. Karina is not very happy with this idea because she considers it quite scary. She thinks that the man will again sell strange things to the villagers because many people do not know how to use them. Felicia finds this idea very interesting. It was complicated by the fact that the man was listening to speeches simultaneously, and Asakura asked to first look at his action plan regarding the arrangement of the shop before the head of Klaus sees it. He especially wanted to show the plan to Alicia because she knows how to use magical items. Daiichi said this so that the girls would know about his current plan. Sakura Daiichi takes matches and lighters out of his bag, and the girls watch with interest because they have never seen such things and really want to know what they are for. Alicia and Karina carefully examined the items. The boy understood that they were seeing this for the first time and did not know how to use them at all. It was obvious because they do not come across things from another world every day. The boy lights 1 match. Asakura explains that these are not just ordinary matches, but waterproof. And suddenly a small but very bright and stable flame bursts on a piece of wood. Karina thought it was magic. Alicia disagreed because she did not feel any magical power at all. The girls wondered how to make fire without magic and without any items. The man explains that this is not a magical item at all and not magic. Ordinary people can use it without any attributes. Daiichi says that these matches ignite very easily. The boy explains that they can easily set anything on fire. For example, he throws a small wooden plank with fire onto a pile of dry leaves, and it quickly starts burning. Alicia wonders if these matches can replace a magical item. The man adds a special liquid to the pile of leaves and agrees with the girl, then easily demonstrates all the quite ordinary properties of items in his world. Asakura Daichi says that he wants to sell such items to people who, for various reasons, cannot use magic, and giving such people the opportunity to use magic is commendable. Karina, eating a strawberry with a piece of cake, thinks that selling such things to ordinary people is somehow not very profitable, and she does not quite understand Asakura's goals and why he still decided to do it. He sincerely wants to make life easier for these people. After all, that is why he will sell the necessary things at a price affordable for ordinary people. Karina looks at the boy distrustfully, and Alicia looks with sympathy. Daichi asks what happened, and the girl shakes her head from side to side, showing that everything is fine. The boy constantly says that the rich still buy rare things, and this is not very right, and Karina admits that she had not even thought about it because you cannot always think about such things when you have so many tasks. The boy does not listen to the girl and says that the rich can afford everything, and Karina, frowning, repeats again that she had not even thought about this topic. Alicia understands that they will have great success, and suggests to Daichi to start selling consumables, because this could make his idea very problematic. Asakura Daichi understands that there are currently no problems with the availability of goods, and Karina immediately recalls that he has a large warehouse, so he will definitely never have problems with either availability or quantity of any goods. Asakura understands the danger, and says that in a difficult moment he will definitely come up with something. Alicia does not understand why he is so calm. It seems Asakura Daichi really believes that everything will be simple. The boy smiles and looks into the distance, thinking that there is nothing complicated about this, and in any case will show it to the management to get well acquainted with the plan and the sales idea. The boy looks confidently ahead, and is convinced that difficult does not mean impossible. The girls eat candies and understand that they will not be able to convince Asakura Daichi. The girls are eating their second cheesecake. The boy reminds me of one thing. He asks Karina if she has elemental magic and how much of each. He is very curious to find out about it. Karina holds a fork in front of her and counts 3 elements: water, fire, and wind, while Daichi looks on admiringly and wonders how much elemental magic she has. Alicia folds her hands in front of her and looks at them, modestly saying that she knows absolutely all the elements. And at first glance, you wouldn't say that such a delicate and sweet girl has so much strength. The guy is simply shocked. Now he thinks that Alicia is even cooler, and Karina says that the fact that Alicia possesses all the magical techniques is a big secret. Asakura Daichi expresses his understanding and believes that it is better not to ask the girls anything more to avoid being intrusive and to preserve his relationships with Karina and Alicia. After this, Karina reproached Alicia for not answering such a question immediately. Alicia was a little upset and apologized. This information is quite important and obviously needs to be kept secret. Asakura believes that both girls are witches, so they are in the guild and can calmly talk about the ranks that Daichi so wants to learn about. Karina agrees and says that she and Alicia have a high rank. It seems the strongest rank is A, and the weaker ones follow in alphabetical order, and this scheme is simple and clear even for someone who came from another world. Asakura Daichi was shocked by the level of the girls, considered them cool witches, and realized that his previous opinion about their low skill was mistaken. The boy says that Karina's appearance does not mean she is a skilled mage, because she even fought the royal monkey with a sword, not magic, and Asakura initially did not understand what was happening, so he asked for an explanation. Karina explains that she has a rank, magic without items, and wind magic, and Daichi wants to know if she used magic during the fight with the royal monkeys. Karina says that then she just put all her strength into the attack, and she did not have time to use much magic. Karina remembers that Asakura used wind magic, and because of that spent all his energy. It was very unwise, because to fight for a long time you need to properly distribute your strength. The boy apologizes. He offers the girl to try ice cream that tastes like whipped cream. The ice cream in the cup tempts with its attractive and appetizing appearance. Karina notices that the boy has become kinder, and the ice cream really looks creamy. The girl tasted a small piece from the spoon and immediately melted from the taste. At that moment, Daichi asks if Alicia is also B rank. The girl explains that she has no combat experience. When she first saw the royal monkey, she was shocked and could not even raise her hand. Daichi asked the girl if she knows how to use magical items, and she agreed. And luckily she could enchant, so she decided to try this skill, which helped them in that difficult battle. The boy explains the enchanting skill, and Alicia says that items used against witchcraft are magical and can be applied to enhance the effect of another item. For example, if you enchant an item with fire, it will acquire fire properties. That's how it works. It seems that there is nothing complicated here, but in fact it requires great skill. Alicia happily says that in the same way you can understand the power of an item, then even those who do not know how to use magical properties will be able to use it. As long as there is magic in the item, Alicia can use it. Inspired, Daichi says that if you compare one magical item with 4 enchanted ones, they will be equal in power. But Karina says that everything is much more complicated. Alicia explains that enchantment magic is far from limited. For example, an ignition item will simply catch fire. If the user has a first-class set of magical tools, it may seem that he controls the size of the fire, but such a set is very expensive. There is one reason, and it is very dangerous. The less you use this item, the better. It may happen that someone wants to light the stove, but it turns out to be fireballs that can cause harm. The guy, interested, asks the girl if she was born with the ability to use magic. Karina confirms, and explains that it is an innate talent. Such people are very rare. But Daichi was just lucky. The guy has already thought that it is worth postponing the idea of creating magical items. He thinks he would like to have an enemy detection station, but it is almost impossible to carry. He also does not want to burden Nick. After all, Nick is usually someone's secret weapon. When the decisive moment comes, Daichi forces him to use water magic. Polina suggests that if Nick detects enemies using Karina's wind magic, it might work, and he asks Karina to show how she searches for an opponent with wind magic. Karina doubted this matter because she believed that it cannot be shown and seen immediately, so she did not want to show her skills right away because she considered the timing unlucky. The guy immediately began to flatter and kindly assure that there is nothing wrong with it. He convinces Karina to try her skill and show how skillfully she uses it in practice. Sweet's plates are already empty. Karina closes her eyes, and a large circle appears above her, like a radar detecting monsters. A line moves inside the circle and thereby activates the girl's skill. Suddenly, Nick reacted to something, and his gaze changed from calm to frightened. Sakura Daichi noticed this, and Karina seems to have detected something with her skill, and the results are not encouraging. Karina closed her eyes and leaned forward a little. She feverishly asks the guy to wait because she felt someone's presence nearby. They need to be very careful not to get into trouble. The boy guessed that there was some monster near them. Karina did not listen to anyone. She just said that it was something big and it could move. The girl thinks that it might be a person. The boy wonders what to do in such a dense forest. Suddenly he realizes with horror that these could be bandits who will mercilessly deal with them or cause harm. Karina cannot determine how many bandits are nearby. Here, Alicia confidently says that there are about 8 bandits there. Karina thanks the girl. She only apologizes in response and says that this is only an approximate figure, and relying solely on it would be a mistake. However, this situation helped both Sakura and Karina not to reveal Nick's ability. Karina smiles and agrees. The boy understands that this is much better than her wind magic because it can be inaccurate and should not be relied upon. Now they have more accurate information that will help in the search. The boy assumes that Alicia is not as graceful as she seems at first. Now it is clear why Karina wants everything to remain a secret for as long as possible. If you look at it that way, not only Karina, but also Klaus and Captain Jeffrey are hiding information about Alicia. The guy understands that now is definitely not the time for such thoughts. The boy is again thinking about the number of bandits. He asks the girls if they think there were fewer bandits last time and even suggests that it was some group of adventurers. Karina was already preparing to draw the sword from the sheath. She does not deny that it could have been a coincidence, but it is hardly a coincidence, so the guys need to be ready for anything. Karina puts on gloves and with a serious face asks the guys to keep their distance until they find out who they really are. It was as if the table where the boys sat did not exist at all. The girls and Asakura packed their things quickly, very quickly. They walk through the forest among giant trees that cast large shadows on the ground. In fact, Asakura Daichi has a skill that is highly valued here, and although he tries to avoid using it, he can get practically anything he desires. As it turned out, they found 8 opponents in total, and if they are bandits, the boy and Karina will be able to defeat them and protect Alicia. So the boy asks Karina if they will hide. The girl says that it is dangerous and asks the boy to sit quietly because they do not know what kind of magic or skills the opponents have. And besides, Nick felt that a very strong person is nearby. Suddenly, a kitten climbs out of the boy's hoodie and looks ahead tiredly. The boy begins to suspect that they were forbidden because Nick's reaction was not very encouraging. This man definitely does not intend to spare those who destroyed the village. He is already ready to use the entire arsenal from the storage so that the guilty get what they deserve and cannot escape so easily. Karina says that things are getting worse and worse. The boy wonders what happened. The girl turns and says that the number of opponents has increased. Karina frowns and says that there are about 20 opponents nearby. The boy realizes that this is a lot. Asakura will not be able to use all the items from his world for defense. If these are real bandits, their storage must be nearby. If the boys find it, everything will end once and for all. If they find the bandits' storage, they will definitely be able to protect the villagers. Alicia addressed Karina and wanted to suggest something, but she immediately interrupted her and categorically refused. So Karina urged the boys to return and report everything to Head Bertram and Captain Jeffrey. The boys returned. Captain Rat is sincerely glad that they came and called Jeffrey to him. The man will probably willingly listen to the boy and his proposal, but has no idea what Daichi wants to talk about. The man gets up from behind the table and asks the boys to wait a little, then offers them tea as a sign of hospitality, takes the teapot, and is about to pour tea into the cups. The man politely refuses. He asks for the opportunity to talk to that man before Captain Jeffrey arrives. Asakura is a little worried but determined to achieve his goal and will not back down. The man smiles gently and is about to pour tea into a mug, asks the boy a question, and allows him to say whatever he wants, and Klaus listens attentively and kindly to Daichi, who wants to tell him something. Daichi loudly announced that he wants to open a store in this village. The captain, shouting over him, repeated it so loudly that the tent almost flew away. The boy covered his ears with his hands and noticed that even the neighbors probably heard the captain's voice. The captain was embarrassed and apologized. Daichi calmly placed waterproof matches on the table, and the man looked at them in surprise and asked if he really intended to sell such goods and what these things were. Immediately, Asakura Daichi lights a match, and it burns brightly. He explains to the man that magic is not needed for this phenomenon. The man is surprised and immediately thinks of one thing. The men hold the match in their hands. He looks at the unknown object with sincere surprise and curiosity. He understands that this match can be used only once and asks the man if this time is limited. The man confidently agrees. Daichi firmly decided that the product would be in great demand. He explains that he wanted to sell it to people who do not know how to use magic. It is immediately clear that the man tensed a little when he heard that he was going to sell all the goods to the general public. Captain Klaus asks how much such goods will cost in his store. The man explains that all these goods cost 2 silver coins each. There are 2,000 Japanese yen, although in reality waterproof matches cost only 1,000. He is not engaged in charity, he trades. The man waved his hand with satisfaction. He understood everything. Captain Klaus asks about the price of the flint. He replies that 60,000 will cost 1 silver coin. The man was outraged and immediately hit the table with his hand. He did not understand why this should cost much less than the matches. Asakura explains that this match lights easily and is water resistant. The man suddenly turns, approaches the cabinet, and addresses Karina. The man takes out some incomprehensible device. It looks more like a stone with a heavy metal handle. He asked Karina to light a fire with this object. Karina struck a metal object against a stone, and sparks immediately flew out, igniting the paper on the plate. The paper caught fire, and smoke from it quickly spread throughout the room. The boy understands everything and wants to know if it is difficult to start a fire without matches, and Asakura Daichi understands that more flints can be sold if the resident can start a fire himself with flint and metal. Captain Klaus says that flint should be sold a bit more expensively, and asks Asakura Daichi's opinion on this idea. He still decided to express his opinion about selling these unusual goods, which do not require magic at all. Suddenly, he immediately remembers the sweet smiling face of that girl who could not use magic at all. Daichi refuses the man because he is convinced that he will sell flint for 1 silver coin. An awkward silence hung between the man and that guy. Daichi understands that it is not even worth trying to compete with such a man, as it was entirely expected from the head of the company Klaus. The head of the company Klaus Golden Crane must be protected. Asakura was a bit embarrassed by the situation and doubted whether that man would approve this matter, which seemed more like charity than trade. But that man persistently insisted on his point and awaited a response from Klaus's leader. Head Claus understands everything and strokes his mustache with his fingers, saying that since Mr. Esakara says so, he is not at all against this matter. Now it seems that the man realized he would not be able to convince Daichi. The boy takes out more things, among them a figurine of a rose, a packet with something unclear, and a lighter. He wants to sell a few more items that others have not seen and says these things are for the rich and kings. The man is very happy and asks what else is in the boy's assortment. Suddenly, Jeffrey's voice is heard near the tent entrance. He returned with a message from Klaus. The boy asked to wait a little and said he would show the rest later. They immediately understood each other with the man and both agreed to the terms. Now the trade of unusual goods will definitely take place, and the boy will open his own store. Jeffrey's head peeks out of the tent. He is invited inside. Klaus, when Jeffrey stood behind the boys and did not let them leave, asks them to tell what really happened in the forest and in the village. Klaus was serious, and Asakura, Alicia, and Karina were already thinking about how to answer the man's question. Bandits attacked the village. Now it is swarming with robbers who mercilessly turn everything in their path into ruins and piles of trash. Meanwhile, a suspicious group is hiding in the forest. These shadows hide in the forest to uncover the truth. Chapter Clause says he has a proposal. The man asks Jeffrey who this man is. Jeffrey says they could be hunters or adventurers. But after the bandits attack the village, more and more bandits appear on the roads near the forest. The likelihood that these are the same bandits is very high. One of those present suggested dealing with this threat the same way as with the robbers. Jeffrey fully supports the proposal. The man waits for orders and advises splitting up to carefully inspect the forest and make sure it is safe. At this time, the boy wonders if it will be possible to defeat the bandits with all this caravan and protection. Klaus says that of course he would like to organize a search, but he did not plan to divide the boys into groups, and Jeffrey believes that Karina should have been involved in the search from the very beginning. Klaus understands that this is not a bad idea at all, and agrees. The man immediately raises his hand and says he also wants to participate because in this case there will be no security problems. Alicia also wants to join. Head Klaus points his finger at the boys. Since the boy and Alicia are his guests, he cannot put them in danger because it would harm his reputation. Klaus apologizes and is forced to refuse the boy's proposal. Then Karina decided to turn to the leader and believes that the participation of Alicia and this boy in the search is a pretty good idea. Karina began to tell the leader that Mr. Asakura showed himself well in the fight with the Monkey King last night, but she remained silent about what technique he used there. Karina continues to say that besides unusual types of weapons, Asakura also demonstrated skill in high magic without attributes, which has destructive power and can cause enormous damage. According to Karina, Lady Alicia also has enough experience to avoid danger, and Chapter Clause addresses Karina, asking if the guests will survive during the fight. Karina says that Mr. Asakura has the most powerful firepower in the entire camp. He has excellent physical attributes and will easily avoid the enemy. Suddenly, Alicia enthusiastically raises her hand. She says she can perform a remote magical attack if needed. After these words, Klaus and Karina agreed that it was time to stop. Alicia, upset, assumed that Klaus would consider her a burden. Chief Klaus says that he does not think so at all, and Karina asked Alicia to leave all the fighting to the guards. Alicia slowly lowers her palm and looks at it sadly. Asakura begins to guess from others' reactions that Alicia has a certain status. Possibly she is from an aristocratic family. Headcloth closes his eyes and gives all the guys permission, ordering them to avoid fighting as long as possible, because their main priority is to return home safely. Klaus says that Jeffrey will be in reserve. Karina should lead the search party, and he asks to leave the choice of the rest of the people to himself. So now it is very important to select the right people for this task. All the guys agreed and understood the instructions. The ash from the burned paper went out on the saucer, and the smoke rose high. The guys are already leaving the camp. Karina says that there are only 5 in their search party. Karina is the captain of the squad, which, besides Lady Alicia and Daichi, includes 2 more guards, and the commander says he will tell these 2 that Nick is an expert in magic without attributes. Asakura sincerely believes that Karina can really be relied upon in this matter, since the girl has all the necessary qualities in sufficient measure. Karina sincerely thanks the guy. She says that some people still should not know what abilities Asakura has and what his level of magic is. Karina turned around and looked gently at the boy. She raised her hand to her chin and noticed that people are very funny. Asakura was very puzzled by her expression and words, and decided to be a little more careful, considering Karina's remarks. Karina thought, closed her eyes, and said that it would be nice to somehow hide Asakura's special ability. The boy is surprised because it seems his skill is already disguised and nothing more is needed. He says he will think about it on the way with the boys. Meanwhile, Karina continues to think and suggest various options. One can use melee weapons, for example a katana or something similar. Karina calls Denise and Frida. They stood nearby and soon heard the voice of a girl who said she had a certain job for them. Dennis addressed Karina kindly, called her madam, and asked what had happened. Frida noticed that Karina was very upset and also wondered what had happened. Frida and Denny are 2 young people. The girl has hair tied in a ponytail, and the boy has a rather unusual and memorable appearance. Karina says she felt the presence of a suspicious group of about 20 people in the forest, and asks Frida and Dennis to go with her and the guys to make sure she is right. Dennis runs his palm over the stubble on his cheek. He feels that such searches, especially now and among 20 people, are unlikely to yield results. Frida laughed modestly but sweetly. She noticed that her partner simply had no luck with a profitable job. The man apologizes to Frida and explains that his main principle is a convenient way to make money. Dennis really hopes for understanding from his partner. Asakura notes that the dialogue between Dennis and Frida is very witty. It is immediately clear that they are true professionals in their field. Karina tells Frida and Denise that they will hear all the details on the way. 2 new students ask about Asakura and Alicia. Karina begins her story. The boys continued their long journey. Karina says that she and Asakura will stand at the forefront. Alicia is to be in the center of the squad. Dennis and Frida are to go at the end of the group. Dennis loudly called the man. He was surprised that despite rumors that Mr. Asakura is an ordinary merchant, he has combat skills, and Mr. Asakura himself was surprised by this gesture. Daichi did not understand why the man did not hear his position, but the man smiled and said that he was a bit embarrassed to call it combat skills, because the fight with the Monkey King last night was his second in a row. Suddenly, the man loudly exclaimed that the victory over the royal monkeys in the second fight testified to his talent. He patted Asakura on the back as a sign of approval. He asked not to call him Mr. because he does not like formalities, and asked to call him Asakura, or Daichi. He himself said that just Daichi is better. The man put his hand on the boy's shoulder and moved forward. Dennis once heard that Daichi was going to go to the city and open a shop there. The man wants to verify these rumors and asks Asakura about it. The boy confirms Dennis's suspicions and says that although this is his main goal, he still does not know if he will stay there. Dennis believes that Karam is a good option to start a trading business. There is a large population, and it is an important strategic point on the trade route between the capital and the port. Asakura is very glad for such useful information and sincerely thanks the man for his help. And Dennis suddenly offers to escort her to Karam Daichi. Dennis has his own view of the situation. He hoped that when Daichi reaches the village of Takura, he would start selling rare goods from abroad. Asakura now understands everything, and actually after the search operation is completed, he only plans to open a small kiosk. Daichi said that he just wanted to try trading goods not from this country, and Denise immediately was surprised and asked the boy about the unusual machine he was going to sell. Asakura Daichi explains that his product allows one to ignite a fire, and Denis nods approvingly, having already heard rumors about such things, but the man disproved his expectations. Daichi lights one of the waterproof matches again. The flame suddenly flared up, and Dennis watches this miracle enchanted, not believing that such a thing can be done without magic. Frida was also surprised by this unusual trick. Karina addresses the boys and orders them to line up. They are already approaching the place where Karina recently felt the presence of 8 people. They approached closer to the forest. When the boys asked if Karina felt anything here, she shook her head in denial. Despite this, the boys should not relax. They should remain alert. Dennis, to cheer up the boys, took a funny pose lying down with a raised leg, turned to Karina, noticed that she was too restless, and tried to assure everyone that he was always ready to fight. Unfortunately, no one appreciated Dennis's maneuver. Moreover, in this position, he did not inspire confidence. Asakura Daichi stepped forward, and when Nick suddenly took off his sweatshirt, the pet sensed someone's presence and, digging sharp claws into the boy's sweatshirt, sharply turned his head toward the source of the sensations. Asakura understands that the opponents are 3 hours away from them. The boy believes that if Nick noticed someone using wind magic, Nick should be more careful, and Daichi thinks about how to hint this to the others. Suddenly, behind Asakura, Alicia's voice sounds. She points forward and seriously says that about 5 kilometers in the indicated direction stand 3 people. Asakura breathes a sigh of relief and is glad that he did not have to think about how to inform the boys about the strangers. Daichi realizes that they are already very close and takes binoculars out of his pocket, and Denise, surprised and a little confused, asks what kind of device it is and asks to look at it. The boy hands the binoculars to Denny and offers him to look as well. Dennis immediately raises them to his eyes and starts shouting in amazement because all distant objects suddenly became very close. At this time, Daichi returned to Karina and whispered that through the binoculars he noticed something shining in the bushes and pointed to Dennis, who was still curiously studying the world through the new device for him. The boy says that he looked around and accidentally noticed the shine. In fact, everything happened thanks to Nick's instinct. Karina closes her eyes and is ready to give another command to her group. She reports that an unknown group is less than 2 kilometers from them. The guys do not know the details yet, so the search area needs to be expanded. Dennis looks at Karina through the binoculars and believes that in a dangerous situation, his Karina should be expected to be extremely cautious. Frida is also very proud of Karina and nods approvingly, confirming his words. Karina addresses Alicia and says that she relies on her. The girl is determined and ready to follow the squad captain's instructions. Physical enhancement is activated. Karina calls on the guys to prepare for battle. Frida and Dennis prepare their shields. Karina asked Asakura Daichi to also take out her shield. Suddenly, Asakura takes out a huge shield that easily covers his entire body. All the guys are surprised by such a large and unusual shield. Karina notes that it is much better to buy a simpler shield than this one. Alicia is even inspired. She believes that such a strong shield is an excellent solution because it allows you to move forward boldly and swing in all directions. The guys quiet down a bit. Alicia started drawing a map of the area on the ground with a branch. She explains that the cave is about 2 kilometers from them. In this cave, there is an unknown group of people or beast people resembling humans. Alicia is horrified because she is sure that the unknown group definitely has more than 50 people, and possibly even over 60. The guys react differently to what Alicia said. The girl says that this is all she managed to sense, but finding out more will be very difficult because the unknown group is in the cave. Dennis concludes that this is more likely an underground organization engaged in unclear activities in the cave. Frida asked not to make hasty conclusions, but agreed that it looked very suspicious. Karina says that Alicia has enough information and gave her a sign to step back. Asakura feels that she and the guys are behaving too cautiously. After these words, Frida and Denny exchanged glances. A moment later, they threw their heads back. Dennis, covering his eyes with his palm, says that there are werebeasts in the group, and Frida adds that werebeasts have an extremely keen sense of smell and may have already sensed their presence. Dennis says that it is better to step back now and return with more similar information, but no one should be allowed to return without at least the smallest piece of information. Frida says it is worth praising that they managed to find out the approximate number of group members and locate their shelters. Frida and Denny laughed loudly. They believe that even for such little information they will receive a special reward. Asakura Daiichi scratched his cheek with a puzzled finger and understood everything the guys wanted to tell him. Denise approaches Daiichi from behind and places his palm on his shoulder, asking if he knows what is most important for safety. Asakura offers to tell him. Then Denny winks and talks about honesty. Asakura Daiichi immediately recalls his speeches and stories about being from abroad, going to relatives, and being paid in silver at home. The boy with a strange smile thanks for the advice. Now he will understand the essence. Karina turns to Daiichi and says they are already leaving. Frida blows the boy an air kiss and says she really loves honest guys. Sakura blushed a little and turned red. Denise instantly ran up to him and elbowed him in the face, asking if he had fallen in love, and the boy left a censer near the trunk of one of the big trees before leaving. The boys came to the camp. Asakura could not believe his eyes. Before the departure, the whole camp was full of life, but now there was only an empty field in its place. Karina says that it seems all the people have moved to Starodavni, and the camp members are gradually packing their things in the neighboring village. Karina notices that the villagers are just staring at the newcomer. The boy wonders where all the bandits have gone and what they will do if they suddenly return. Karina explains that she and the group have no intention of fighting the criminals, so everything should be fine. Dennis says that there are quite a few guards here who can prevent an attack, and the fighting strength of the boys in the group is at a sufficient level, so in any case, the victory will be theirs. Since the messenger has already been sent with the message for the night watch, he needs to stay in the village and distract the enemy until nightfall. Now everything became much clearer for Asakura Daiichi. Dennis says they have a problem. It turned out there were many more enemies than they expected. Frida suggests asking the villagers for help, but is not sure if the people will believe them. Karina looks at the tent and thinks that first they need to inform everyone about everything. The footballer begins to understand that they will have to set up camp here and tells Karina about it. The girl replies that they really have no other choice right now. On the other hand, they can easily get support from the villagers. When Dennis asks what the elder and others said, Karina says they need to find reinforcements. Prieta remembers that this village has its own civil defense organization. Karina said it would be good if they joined their group. Dennis says they will have no choice if they are told that their village will be attacked. Karina addresses Dennis and Frida and says that they will rest until the evening and then be able to return to their usual work. Frida is surprised about what Mrs. Karina will do in this case. The girl says that she will show the main street of Daichi to Mrs. Alicia. Karina's calm instantly changed to horror, because Frida and Dennis were outraged when their hosts addressed Mr. Asakura simply by his first name, and immediately began to suspect something. Karina raised her hands in front of her as if objecting, because everything was not at all as the guys thought. She reminds everyone that Mr. Asakura simply does not like formalities. Dennis notices that Karina did not speak to Asakura like that during the task. Frida confirms and says that Mr. Karina is probably just nervous because of the mission. Karina blushed with shame. Dennis, noticing this, suggested that Karina might be hiding something from them. Karina loudly asked them to stop teasing her. Dennis addresses the man and asks for his opinion. Asakura hesitates and says that Karina really behaved a little differently. Maybe she was really nervous. In fact, Asakura Daichi was very unhappy, and deep down wanted the guys to kill him, and the slightest change in Karina's behavior immediately became a reason for mockery by these two. Frida immediately rushed to Karina with hugs and kisses, trying to draw her into women's conversations. She says that if Karina needs advice from a sister, she is always ready to help. Karina simply refuses. Dennis also really wants to talk to the girls. Karina gets angry and pushes Frida away. She wants these jokes to stop sooner. Frida addresses Asakura and winking asks if he considers Karina a cute girl. Asakura says that without a doubt Karina is very beautiful when she is nervous, but now, in his opinion, she is more cute, and Daichi does not understand who told him to say that. Karina immediately got confused and did not believe what she heard, while Frida and Denny stood behind, holding hands, and were touched by this confession. Asakura takes Karina by the hand and leads her away. The boy says goodbye to Frida and Dennis and says that they still need to open the store. Karina was embarrassed when she felt the touch on her hand. Frida and Dennis smiled sweetly and offered Mrs. Karina to go first. Karina got angry and does not understand why the boys wish her luck if she just wants to look at the store with Asakura. The boys are already moving away from each other, while Frida and Dennis still want to have a good time. Karina thinks the boys do not hear her at all. Karina and Asakura Daichi are still in the village. They have 2 hours left. The boy suggests just watching the locals' reaction today. Karina turns away from the boy and says that maybe there will be no noise because there are few people on the street today. Alicia noticed that Karina was upset and asked if she missed something interesting, and Karina came to her senses and replied that she did not miss anything important. Alicia looks at Karina with a hypnotic gaze. She puts her hand on her shoulder and says that something definitely happened. Karina got embarrassed again and said it was nothing serious. Karina, to distract Alicia's attention, suggested they prepare for the store opening because only 2 hours remain and there is no way to delay. Asakura waves his hand, trying to attract the attention of Karina and Alicia. He wants to tell something important or give a sign for them to come closer and understand what is happening. The boy approaches an elderly woman who sells things and greets her, and the woman asks if he wants to buy something. Asakura says he wants to offer the woman some goods and asks her to spare some time. The man places many medium and small boxes on the table. The saleswoman nearby looks at him with interest. The woman sincerely praises the boy for having very good boxes and says that she even envies Asakura Daichi. The woman finds it strange that as she gets older, she envies people with boxes more and more. The girl nearby nodded sweetly and smiled. Asakura extended his hand to them and asked how women light a fire. One woman answered and lit it with flint. The girl nearby confirmed what was said. The girl puts her palms to her cheeks and exhales heavily, saying that not everyone has even a little magical power, and all these magical artifacts are very expensive. Then Asakura smiled and offered the girl and the woman to buy a cheap device with which they can easily start a fire without magic. The woman could not hide her surprise. Then Daichi took one match from the pack and asked the woman to extend her palm to him. Asakura decisively ran his hand along the box over the woman's hand holding the match. A spark instantly ignited and passed through the girl and the woman, causing incredible shock. Those around immediately noticed this situation. Many did not understand how the flame was lit without magical items, so they looked at each other in surprise and tried to solve this secret. Karina and Alicia were happy that the product began to be in demand and gained popularity, and Asakura, with confidence in his voice, understood that his business was starting right now, and this was only the first step to great success. Asakura spreads his arms to the sides and tries to calm the customers who came, asks them not to panic and assures that there are enough matches for everyone, and no one will be left without the product. The boy says that he distributes lists in turn, so there is no point in pushing, and people crowded to the counter, trying to get the unusual product that would allow them to start a fire without magic. The girl received a box of matches, lit one, and was very surprised because she could not believe that she could now start a fire without magic, and felt that this simple action became possible thanks to the unusual matches. Asakura Daiki brings a large barrel with wooden planks, shows the girl a device for igniting, with which the fire easily transfers to the firewood. But this thing is disposable. The girl nods in response. Asakura understands that she did not fully understand the principle of ignition. The boy asks for a chance to show how it works. Daichi lights a match and throws it into the firewood, which was previously soaked with a flammable liquid. The flame spreads to all the planks, not missing a single one. Everyone around was impressed because they had never seen anything like it, and one of the men noticed that the flame quickly and easily spread to the wood, and he was surprised by the speed and strength of this phenomenon. Sakura says that buyers have already noticed that matches can start a fire even without magic. With the help of the igniting substance, even the smallest flame easily flares up. That is, this can ignite any firewood. He regrets a little and says that his goods have a small drawback. They are disposable. Customers reacted disappointedly. Some even expressed dissatisfaction because they realized that the product cannot be used repeatedly. Sakura, with a slight smile, reports that a box of 25 matches costs 2 silver coins. He emphasizes the quality of the product and hopes that the price will attract buyers. In the box with the igniting means there were as many as 60 items, and it costs only 1 silver coin. People around were very surprised. Asakura recalled the words of the head Klaus that the reaction of the residents would be exactly like that. The boy loudly and energetically addresses the residents, asks if they will buy the product, his voice full of confidence. He smiles in anticipation of the reaction and is ready to continue trading. Suddenly, a hand in a glove rises in the crowd. A young girl with a determined expression says that she wants to buy both products. All eyes turn to her and she confidently waits for an answer. She pays for the goods with 3 silver coins, and Iichi gratefully thanks her for the purchase, hoping that the thing will bring her satisfaction and she will return again. Asakura asks the girl to stay for a few minutes if she has some free time because he wants to show her something else, and the girl asks Daichi in surprise if he really has any more goods. Asakura explains that this is not exactly a product, but rather a small bonus for everyone. The boy believes that others will definitely like it, and the girl agrees. The boy takes an item out of his bag and asks others to pay attention to show his small bonus. Sakura takes out the grill and places it on a barrel with burning firewood. The others do not understand what the young merchant wants to do. Sakura immediately skewers pieces of meat onto sticks, places them on the grill, and the meat immediately begins to spread a pleasant, appetizing aroma. People around start asking the boy what dish he wants to prepare. Daichi explains that he wants to make barbecue. Shish kebab is small pieces of chicken skewered and covered with sauce. One of the visitors sees such a dish for the first time, although he often cooks fried chicken, and the people around were enchanted by the smell from the grill. As far as Daichi knows, the poor and unemployed usually eat only twice a day, in the morning and evening, and he believes that he still managed to awaken the appetite of this part of the population. Asakura takes one ready shashlik on a skewer, calls the girl who first wanted to buy the last 2 pieces, and offers her to try it first. Asakura explains that this is the bonus he mentioned earlier. The girl did not believe that it was so easy to eat and joined the meal. Everyone around did not take their eyes off her and watched every one of her emotions. And the eyes of the girl who tasted the shashlik widened because she had never tasted such delicious food. Asakura smiled with relief, glad that the girl and the villagers liked the barbecue. Meanwhile, the girl managed to eat everything she was given and, admiring the taste, asked what the sauce was made of and if it could be bought. People around, observing what was happening, involuntarily felt that their appetite had increased and could not take their eyes off the events. The air was filled with anticipation, and everyone wanted to become part of this scene. Everyone immediately ran to the store to ask to buy any product in order to be able to try the delicious dish, and some wanted to know if it was possible to buy only one of the offered products. Asakura loudly announces that he has a barbecue and to try it, there is no need to buy anything. Even if someone takes only one product, they will still get their portion. Suddenly, everyone rushed to the counter because many people believe that by buying 2 sets of products, they should receive 2 portions of barbecue. The boy sincerely asked to wait a little because he could not keep up at all due to such a rush of customers. He took a couple of portions and approached the woman near whom he had opened his shop. Asakura politely bowed his head, thanked the woman and the girl nearby for allowing him to trade near them, and apologized for the inconvenience caused to them. The woman asks Asakura not to worry because they are closing anyway. The boy gives them a large portion of shashlik as a token of gratitude. But the girl and the woman sincerely thanked the boy for the treat, smiling warmly. He lightly waved his hand, watched them leave, and then confidently returned to his work, ready to continue working. Asakura Daichi only managed to give orders. He was so tired that he barely realized what he was doing, while Karina and Alicia stood behind him eating shashlik. Meanwhile, the girl and the elderly woman finally said goodbye to the boy and left. And Asakura announced that his story would soon end, so if anyone still wants to buy a product, do not hesitate. Suddenly, adult men approach the counter from the side. With a slight sneer, they notice that the boy's business is going very well, greedily watching how he sells out all the goods, and clearly also want to join the work. The boy understands that most likely they are just threatening for no reason. Then a man asks Asakura to give him some chicken for free. Asakura, smiling lightly, says that unfortunately everything is already sold out and there is no chicken left at all. Adds that the demand was unexpectedly high, and apologizes for the inconvenience. The men immediately became angry and began shouting sharply and insulting that man. And one of them said that he saw Asakura put the chicken he had just taken into his bag. He bows at the waist and tells the men that the shop is closing. He informs them that tomorrow he will be at the same place with his goods, so the men can come and buy the things they need. The men consider such treatment of customers simply unacceptable and think they should teach Asakura how to conduct business properly. Suddenly, 2 newcomers approached the boy, but a sword blocked their path right under their noses, and Karina stood between the man and Asakura and glanced at the wrongdoers. One of the men pointed at her with a finger and assured that she had nothing to do with this matter, but thought it better for her to step aside, otherwise it would hurt. And the man with the eye patch understood the complexity of the situation, because there was a mage of the class in front of them. On Karina's pinky are 2 keychains with the letters B and C. The men are stunned by such an appearance. Asakura does not understand what is happening now, and the men treat Karina as a lady and ask what she wants if she is not involved in this. Karina calmly says that she is his bodyguard. Her cold gaze, like a blade, penetrates to the bone and makes the men involuntarily tense. They feel her unwavering determination and hidden threat. One of the men frowns and says to Karina that he doubts she can really handle 4 adult and experienced people. The girl smiles, tilts her head to her shoulder, frightening the men even more, and says that she should not be underestimated at all. Otherwise one might regret it very much. The men turned back, realizing that they could not deceive the man with the bodyguard, accepted the situation, and, learning that all the goods were sold out, prepared to leave, glancing one last time at that man and Karina. A voice sounded from the side and asked what happened. It turned out that a little higher sat a man with distinct features and a scar. He inquired what the problem was. One of the men, happily recognizing Alan, brightened up and admitted that he was surprised to see him here, and did not understand how his friend could have been in this place all this time. Alan says that he can help the guys with their problems. The man smiles slyly and says that he will be very grateful to Alan. The man returns to Karina with an ironic smile and says that she changed her mind about leaving the salesman guy. Adds that guys like him usually are unlucky and asks how much longer she will tolerate him. And Karina, slightly frowning, looks at him but does not hurry to answer. Karina looked thoughtfully at Asakura, as if waiting for a decision from him, and he, a little embarrassed, immediately began to apologize and explain that all the goods were sold out and nothing was left in the warehouse. The men got angry because they considered such an attitude unacceptable and humiliating. Their patience ran out, and now they demanded only a meeting with Asakura to sort things out and restore order. Asakura covered his mouth with his hand and pretended as if the men misunderstood everything. Daichi said mockingly that he simply considers this group of men fools, so they lost patience and became very angry. They unanimously decided that the trader needed to make ends meet as soon as possible. On the street stood a group of angry men. One of them had a large scar on his face. They looked at the dark-haired boy and the blonde girl, whose hair was tied in a ponytail with a flower in it. Another girl named Alicia Hartland was holding a knitted cat, whose owner was the dark-haired boy named Daichi. She was in a cheerful mood and was rocking its paws. The man with the scar on his face, Alan, raised his hand and closed his eyes. Asked the guys to say why they were silent. The blonde stood before the guys and addressed Alan. He said they were mistaken, underestimating their strength, and for that they should be punished. The girl with the flower in her hair, Karina, and Daichi grimaced at what they heard. Alan said to the blonde who proposed to punish the guys that he did not understand why he himself had not done it yet, and thinks that the blonde is simply afraid of Karina and Daichi. Hearing this, all the men in Alan's gang opened their mouths and laughed loudly. The blonde nervously pointed a finger at Karina, and loudly said that he was just careful because she is a B-class magician. Karina stood calmly and looked at her hands. Men from Alan's gang and Alan himself, who just couldn't hold back their laughter, froze in place in the same poses in which they were laughing, shocked by what they heard. A sinister smile appears on Alan's face. He says he was inattentive and couldn't guess who those guys were. Alan stood up from his seat, reached for the sword on his belt, approached Karinza and Daichi, and said that not only Karina has the status of a mage here. The men from the gang echoed his words. Alan and his men, with the characteristic gang smiles, drew their blades and headed towards the guys, warning them about the upcoming fight. Karina and Daichi took combat positions. They were ready to attack. Karina told Daichi to be careful. Daichi said that 2 armed men were approaching from the front, and another one, probably a mage, was coming from behind. The armed men were walking towards Daichi, and he thought that if it was about physical enhancement, there would be no problem. But if they knew how to use magic, even bullets wouldn't save him. Karina looks at Daichi and asks if he can handle one of the attackers. Daichi turns to her and is silent. He was surprised by her words and thought that Karina asked him for help for the first time, and helping such a beauty as she is motivated him even more to defeat these robbers. Daichi agrees to fight 2 men and starts the attack, holding one hand with the other. A cloud of energy with sparkling waves appears in its hollow. Daichi shouts to Karina that he can defeat 2 men, and Karina loudly replies that it's enough to defeat one who is coming at them from the front. Alan sinisterly asked what the guys were talking about there. The men with swords in their hands continued to attack them. Daichi waited for their attack. A flash of light appeared. After the flash of light, the robbers fell to the ground. They had bleeding wounds which they covered with their hands. The blonde and the rest of the gang were already kneeling before the guys with their heads down. Karina stood with crossed arms in front of the bandits and waited for them to say at least something. Daichi stood nearby and looked at her in surprise. Karina narrowed her eyes and addressed the blonde who had provoked the fight between the guys and the bandits. The blonde, with a silly smile, replied that he had already forgotten what he wanted to say, and asked his comrades if maybe they remembered something and wanted to ask Karina. But the others nervously waved their hands, having no questions. Daichi walked ahead of Karina and squatted before the blonde because he wanted to ask him and decided that he needed to gather more information. The blonde got scared and said he was ready to answer any question that interested Daichi. Daichi, with a calm expression, asked if the bandits had received a request to destroy the goblins, and the man immediately agreed with his words. The man said that he and his colleagues were adventurers registered in this city and pointed with his finger at another, informing that their squads had officially accepted the request. The light-haired man continued to say that the group of that magician, whom he considered Alan, had not received this permission. Alan was in bad condition and breathing heavily. Daichi was still squatting, put his hand on his chin and thoughtfully looked at the blonde, inquiring how many goblins they had caught, but he did not name a specific number. Daichi had an angry squint. He was interested in the exact number of goblins caught. The blonde got scared, and, with horror in his eyes, said that his squad had not caught a single goblin. The second man, the leader of another gang, was also horrified and said that his squad also had not caught a single goblin, and Daichi pondered. The leader of one of the squads, who had caught no more than one goblin, began pointing at the wounded people in the battle and said that those bandits had caught 11 goblins who were then destroyed. One of the men defeated by the boys remained on his knees with cut hands, and when he heard about the goblin massacre and saw that someone from his gang pointed at him, his face filled with fear and horror. Daichi leaned over one of the fallen and asked about the goblins killed by him and the rest of the gang. The man listened and answered affirmatively. Daichi frowned, narrowed his eyes, and asked the man to tell about himself and the others from his squad. The man stepped back, lowered his gaze, and fell silent. Daichi reached out to the wounded man who remained silent at his question. Daichi sharply turned away and asked another man to name their names. Daichi addressed the man with an eye patch and mustache, but he did not immediately understand that he was being spoken to, so Karina intervened and said that he had to tell about the members of the wounded squad. The man in the bandage nervously said that there were only 4 in the wounded squad. Then the man with this eye patch pointed to one of the men with long hair who was in the assault squad. He had shoulder-length hair, was light brown-haired, and a water mage who uses healing magic. The man with the eye patch told the other 2 attackers that they were always at the front of the squad because they could not use magic. These men sat on their knees and covered the wounds received in battle with their hands. The man with the eye patch last pointed to Alan. He also uses magic in battle. He sat down, turned away from the others, and did not say a word. Daichi looked at the people defeated in battle and thought that this was a good team with the right balance of forces. In this situation, it was not surprising that they defeated 11 goblins. But Daichi, looking at them, still doubted something. Daichi stood up, straightened to his full height, raised his hand, looked around, then asked the people around if everyone had received the request to destroy the goblins in the village of Toreno. The man with the eye patch and mustache raised his hand and said that he and his squad had just received such a request, as had the squad of defeated mages. Daichi imagined bloody monsters and asked the man with the bandage why the goblins had not attacked them yet. And the man replied that in 10 days in the village, they had not seen a single goblin. The man with the bandage over his eyes continued to say that it seemed a group of wizards appeared in the village later, and 3 days after their arrival the goblins appeared. Daichi replied to the man with the bandage over his eyes that they were lucky because they managed to leave the village before the goblin attack, otherwise they could have been harmed. The man with the blindfold agreed with Daichi's words. Then Daichi turned away from him to the defenseless men. His attention was diverted by the water mage. Daichi addressed the defeated mages and asked how they managed to defeat the goblins, because he wanted to find out if it was true and how many goblins there were. The water mage said that as soon as they reached the village, they immediately went into the forest to look for some monster. The water mage recalled the forest and continued that other squads said there had been no goblins for over 10 years, so they thought the monsters might be hiding and went to look for them in the dense thickets of the forest. Daichi was interested if the mage squad managed to find the monster's lair. The water mage closed his eyes and shook his head, and Daichi, looking at him, pondered and fell silent. Then he looked at Karina, and she also looked at Daichi, who was looking at her. Karina sharply turned away. Daichi's hand was on his chin. After her turning away, he closed his eyes. Daichi called for silence and asked the men what to do with them next, and Karina stood nearby looking down at her feet. The weapons were piled into one heap, and the guys discussed what to do with the squads. Hand them over to the local authorities, or, if the squads change their behavior, release them. The people from the squads, hearing the words about release, gathered and started talking loudly. Karina got irritated by the noise, and Daiichi was a little surprised by what was happening. Karina turned away from the noisy crowd and said they needed to leave because they had to tell Klaus and Jeffrey everything. Daiichi stood with his eyes closed. Alicia was nearby. In her arms was a cat named Nick. Daiichi looked suspiciously at the water mage, who silently sat with his head bowed on the ground. Daiichi did not take his eyes off the water mage, and believed that his words could be true, because their squad consisted of mages, so they could defeat the goblins and go to the forest bowl to look for them, or so it seemed to him. Daiichi was already moving away from the water mage and still thought that the mage's story seemed suspicious, so he was very worried. Even when he was walking with his back to the water wizard, Daiichi looked in his direction and felt that he was not the type to easily reveal everything, and the wizard raised his eyes and looked at Daiichi, who was walking away. Karina was walking through the camp after the old man, among tents and lit torches. My husband said that before the bandits' attack on the village of Torino, there were 2 squads hunting goblins. Karina came to the company manager with new information. The elderly man looked at her, turned slightly, and asked her to tell what she had felt there. The old man entered one of the camp tents. Karina pulled back the entrance flap and followed him, saying that the group of 4 mages has a very dark aura, and like other adventurers, they should not be trusted. The old man placed his hand on the wooden back of the chair, began to push the chair back, and asked Karina her opinion about the deal between the bandits. Karina cautiously said that they and the others must behave carefully. The old man sat on the chair he had moved earlier. The old man sat down at the table with a small lamp. He stroked his beard and asked if Daiichi really found out about it himself. Karina stood in front of the old man. Karina remembers the friendly Daiichi, who greeted everyone, and together with the elderly man talked about his deed when he organized a kiosk for selling goods, and believed that his idea was connected to the event in the village of Torino. The old man put his hands on the table and supported his chin with his hands. He said he plans to send his people from the bar tonight to find out more information. Daiichi should not do this. Karina bit her lip in anger, immediately bowed before the elderly man, closed her eyes, and then apologized. The elderly man took the cup in his hands, and she said that Daiichi really tried to contact the squad under the pretext of organizing a kiosk, and neither that man nor anyone else could even imagine it. The elderly man raised his gaze to Karina and asked if the adventurers noticed this, because these actions seemed very suspicious. They recall the events of the interrogation of Daiichi's bandits, and the old man says he is not afraid of an attack on the village. He is afraid that the bandits will attack his caravan on the way. Karina silently listened to the elderly man and looked at him. He said it was not worth delving into their problems. After that, he closed his eyes and continued sitting at the table. The senior man looked at Karina again, raised his hand to his face, and asked her about Daiichi, and Karina seriously replied that Daiichi has boundless diligence. Karina remembers how Daiichi's back was moving away from her, and says that Daiichi, besides magic, is also wise. He has a lot of knowledge, and without a doubt he is more educated than Karina. The elderly man was moving coins on the table and listening to Karina. She said that he could count in his head without paper and pen and did it quickly and without mistakes. The elderly man raised a glass to his lips and said that he also noticed Daiichi's ability to count, adding that not even every experienced merchant can count so quickly in their head and sign contracts. Karina recalled how she and Daiichi were in the forest. She wanted to practice offensive magic, and Daiichi took on calculating the range of the strike. By the formula, she was very surprised, and the old man was no less surprised after her story. The old man frowned, touched his face, and asked Karina if she remembered what that calculation formula looked like, while Daiichi remembered, and Karina shook her head from side to side. Kina looked at the man and replied that she did not understand this, and even less could remember it. Karina pondered, and images of Daiichi during calculations began to appear in her imagination. She believed that he used complex computations, but in reality, they were approximate. In her eyes, Daiichi looked like a university lecturer. Then Karina recalled that when Daiichi got tired or bored of counting, he would take out a measuring device and point it at a tree to measure the distance with this strange thing. And the man listened to her in surprise. The old man raised a glass to his face and said that Daiichi, when he was in his homeland, belonged to the royal family or had aristocratic blood. Karina held her hands behind her back and interrupted the man, saying that Daiichi could be a wealthy and calm heir of a noble family or a spoiled son. The elderly man raised the glass to his lips, drank, and asked Karina in surprise why she thought so about Daiichi. A strange expression appeared on Karina's face. She squinted her eyes and said that Daiichi treats everything lightly. Karina's eyes narrowed even more, her eyebrows knitted, and she said that she did not think Daiichi could solve problems on his own because all the troubles around him were solved by others. Karina recalled how Daiichi performed on stage, Alicia stood in front of him with a very satisfied face. Karina finished the story and stood still, her hair barely moving. The elderly man put the cup on the table. Karina suggested increasing the level of surveillance for Daiichi. The elderly man was surprised and interested in Karina's proposal. Karina, with a serious face, said that Daiichi should be placed under surveillance at the same level as secret royal aristocrats or heirs. The elderly man clenched his fists and interlaced his fingers, and he wanted to know the reason for such a proposal from Karina. Karina looked at the man and raised one hand in front of her. She said that even for their country, Daiichi is too dangerous. He has first-class magic without attributes, and there are many strange items in his bag that they have not seen. On Karina's head, the scarf was stretched into a high dome, and she added that, among other things, Daiichi is very educated and can find a way out of any situation using the environment and other people. Karina remembers the image of Daiichi. His hand was stretched forward. A ball of magic was forming in his palm. Around him were a machine gun, a light bulb, a mobile phone, and other things, and this way he can take control of the country. Karina's face changed and became worried. Drops of sweat ran down her cheek. She closed her eyes and thought. Kinda folded her hands behind her back and began to say that Daiichi might turn out to be the ruler of a more magically developed country. Karina again had a wary expression. She narrowed her gaze and said that Daiichi's influence in their country could be too strong. After Karina's words, the old man pressed his palm to his face and sighed heavily. The elderly man frowned and said threateningly that Karina is the daughter of Count Crasher from the royal faction, and intends to defeat Daiichi by any means. Understanding the man's words, Karina frowned, her face twisted with anger. She shouted something and took a step toward him. The atmosphere in the tent became heavy. She stopped by the table and leaned on it with her hands, while the man stood and looked at her motionlessly. He spread his arms to the sides and smiling said to her that all his words were just a joke. Karina's eyes were full of anger, her eyebrows furrowed. She said that due to the current situation in the kingdom of Yendorf, this joke could prove deadly for the elderly man. The old man looked away and scratched his nose, replying that if you do not take into account Daiichi's high status in his native country, two opposing factions might start fighting over his goods and knowledge. Karina lowered her hands and said that the faction that takes his side will have more influence. Then Karina threw her hands behind her back. Behind her stood a dark castle, and she continued to say that the most alarming thing was that Daiichi could be led in another direction. An elderly man thoughtfully stroked his mustache, twirled it between his fingers, and looked threateningly at Karina. He said that everything must be done to prevent Daiichi from leaving for another country. A group of boys was walking through the city, surrounded by houses and tall trees, and Daiichi was walking behind everyone with a sword on his back. Daiichi put his hands behind his back and asked the guys in surprise why they had gathered like that. One of his companions, a dark-haired girl, turns to Daiichi, her hair tied in a ponytail. She was wearing gloves on her hands, and she asked Daiichi with a smile why he did not like her company. The girl with a ponytail approached Daiichi, smiled, and asked if it wouldn't be better to have a partner like her on the team, to which Daiichi shyly agreed. The girl with a smile pointed her hand at the short-haired Dennis and said that if Daiichi doesn't like Dennis, she can scold him, and in general they can take some girl to the team instead of him. Dennis folded his arms on his chest and got angry. The girl with a ponytail kept saying that instead of a middle-aged man, it is better to have beautiful girls on the team. They introduced 3 smiling girls, one dark-haired, the second in uniform, the third in a helmet. Daiichi's face turned red. He nervously scratched his cheek and declined the girls and the team's offer. His cat Nick peeked out from under his shirt, and Alicia smiled behind him. The girl with a ponytail looked at Dennis embarrassedly. Her face slightly reddened, and she said that he was very lucky that Daiichi agreed to keep him on the team, and Dennis fell silent and blushed with shame. Karina slightly turned to the guys and said that everyone must stick to the plan and set up an ambush for the bandits. Karina completely turned her head to Daiichi and told him that Dennis and Frida are level B mages, and both can fight in close and long-range combat. Daiichi walked beside him, the roofs of wooden houses flashing past, and he thought that the mages in the squad were as strong as Karina. Daiichi looked at Denius and Frida and thought that Karina specializes in wind magic, but if the guys are good at offensive skills, for example fire magic, they might be stronger than Karina. Daiichi praised them, and they were surprised by his words. After a moment, Denise smiled, scratched his stubbly chin, and felt flattered by Daiichi's words of praise. Franny blushed and smiled and said that the entire security of the Bertram Company consists of mages higher than Category D, so she doesn't feel anything special. Daiichi and the guys were still outside. He addressed them and said that he didn't quite understand, because he heard that Bertram's guards are very strong. Other people from the surrounding wooden houses lived near the guys, and children were playing on the street. Dennis cheerfully said that they are known in the world as an ordinary security company. Perino was walking ahead of the guys and, without turning to them, said that in battle Denise becomes a pro at mass offensive magic that scares the enemy, and the guys were following Karina and listening to her. Daichi got tired, closed his eyes, everything went dark, and rays of light were coming from him. He felt that he was starting to think about escaping from the guys. Frida said that this is the most effective way, and Dennis replied that he has no doubt about that. Perina stopped near one of the houses and fixed her gaze on a barrel hanging on a chain. The boy stopped not far from her. On the corner of the house, a barrel with a sign saying "Bar Here" hung on a chain. Karina asked everyone to be quiet. Daichi raised his head in surprise, and a knitted cat stuck out from under his shirt near his neck and growled. Daichi nervously looked at the cat. He was curious why the cat got angry. Alicia approached Daichi and the cat and began to wave her finger in front of the cat's face. She was also interested in its reaction. The cat paid no attention to anything, continued to get angry and meow loudly. Daichi thought that maybe Nick in the bar caught the scent of bandits thanks to spirit magic. Daichi told the guys that there might be bandits in this bar. Daichi, Karina, and the cat Nika were talking. Karina asked Daichi what he understood about the bandits from the cat's reaction, and Daichi winked with one eye, agreeing with her. Karina smiled, raised her hand, and said that at this pace it would be easy to handle this task if they found the bandits in the bar, and Denis was the first to enter the bar, followed by the rest of the guys. The guys saw a small diner with stairs to the second floor. On the first floor, there were several tables where men were drinking from large mugs, some clinking glasses, and there were plates with various food on the tables. The guys went inside. Dennis looked around and licked his lips. Karina went second. Daichi tried to do everything but stayed in the restaurant. The others followed behind. Karina carefully examined the place, and something on the side caught her attention. She scratched her head, squinting one eye, and said she found those they were looking for. Daichi looked at her in surprise and stood behind her. In front of the guys sat men they had already defeated earlier. They were at a table near the stairs to the second floor. There were 4 of them, drinking from large mugs and eating, and nearby walked a girl in a headscarf and apron. Alicia approached Daichi, said he was doing well, covered her yawning mouth with her hand, and added that it was good work. Daichi looked at the leg of one of the bandits sitting at the table. There was a hole in the trouser leg, but no wound, so he said that this bandit had already healed. The guys remembered the dark-haired wounded bandit lying on the ground, and Karina said that with those bandits, there was a wizard who used volume magic and could heal such an injury in a couple of minutes. Daichi showed 2 wounded men he had drawn, put his hand on his chin, and said it would take a few minutes, and Karina replied that the wounds she inflicted would heal in 3 minutes. Daichi turned to Karina and said he thought they would just go to the bar and pretend to drink like customers. And Karina closed her eyes, lowered her head, and said that was no longer necessary. Dennis got upset and sat down, looking gloomy. He said he really wanted to drink. Freedom smiled and patted the depressed Dennis on the back with her hand, saying that they could buy some alcohol and wait for them outside. Dennis took a large jug from an elderly mustached man, while Karina and the man in the dark hood stood by the cart on the street. 4 men, whom the guys were waiting for, came out of the bar and left, and Karina watched as the bandits moved away from the corner and said that the bandits had left the village. Dennis and Alicia approached Karina, and Dennis asked where the bandits were going into the forest at such a time. The guys continued to follow those who were moving away, and someone said that they did not need to go into the forest to contact their own. Dennis and Alicia Karina looked from behind the corner, and Karina said that most likely the bandits' contact was hiding somewhere in the forest. They went to him to deliver a letter with information about the situation in the village. Dennis wiped his nose with his finger and smiled, saying that Bertram's guards were smarter than he could have imagined. 4 men were walking through the dark forest. One of them had a large sword on his back, and another said that if they did not cope with the task or something went wrong, they would ask for backup. The guys hid in the bushes, Karina in front, the others behind. They looked around, and at some point Alicia noticed something. Alicia said sharply and tiredly that someone was hiding in the grass. Dennis and Karina turned to Alicia. Alicia and the guys moved. They were alert and walked through the forest. She called everyone to follow her. The guys saw a patch of land overgrown with grass. Alicia and the others were hiding in the grass. Alicia said that this was not good. Daichi looked into the distance in surprise, trying to understand what was happening. Alicia, with a serious face, said that if one believes the conversation of the bandits, then one of the vigilantes is passing information to them. Dennis, sitting down, said that when adventurers are gathered for monster hunting, the group usually gets information from the locals, and Frida, who was sitting next to me, said that there are many gaps in the locals' knowledge. Daichi turned to Dennis, curious about how strong the monster hunters were. And Dennis replied that goblins cause a lot of problems when they gather in packs, but they are not very smart and their numbers help them defeat others. Frida smiled and said that the territory is explored simultaneously with the hunting. Daichi became alert and thought that the guest told the truth, because if the monsters turn out to be stronger than the goblins, or there are unusually many of them, more troops will have to be sent here. Daichi arranged goblin dolls with weapons in their paws, and continued thinking that there are no more goblins threatening the village than people capable of defeating them. So he began to understand the plan to attack Thorin. These were visual images and descriptions of how bandits send goblins against the villagers. The villagers turned to the guild for protection, and the bandits mingled with adventurers to check if they could defeat the villagers. Alicia addressed the guys and said that the bandits are not interested in the whole village. They need to break Bertram's company and rob the village from the other side. Daichi thought that the plan to rob half the village and avoid Bertram's squad looked too suspicious. The bandits stood in the middle of the field where they met another group of men. Ken said that the bandits really did not know about the possible ambush. Alicia replied that all the bandits were on alert. Karina knelt down and said that if Alicia could make everyone hear what the bandits were talking about, Alicia agreed to try and closed her eyes. Then Daichi heard the voice of one of the robbers and was surprised that someone was speaking. He continued to hear that Bertram's caravan was in the city, and that the vigilantes were behaving suspiciously. Daichi was shocked by Alicia's skill. Karina said that Alicia used wind magic, and that's why the guys can hear what the bandits are talking about. One of the bandits said that the vigilantes were left behind in the village. One group of robbers was talking to another. The robber with a scar on his face said that they were interested in the matter of the village Thorin. The others were surprised by his words. Daichi and the rest of the boys continued to sit in the grass and listen to the bandits' negotiations. One of the bandits said that this was the same village they had robbed last time, and the others agreed. The dark-haired bandit with a hump on his nose said that you killed everyone then, and Daichi's face changed. It became stern from what he heard. Another robber replied that after the incident in the village, Bertram's group still had not moved from the spot. The robber with the hunchbacked face said it was too early to confirm that, and the one standing nearby asked what they would do next. Frida and Dennis listened carefully and squinted. The bandit said they were lucky that Bertram's company had gathered here. The bandit with the crooked nose said that this time they would take much more than in that village. The boys ducked down and continued watching and listening to the bandits' negotiations. They rejoiced and encouraged each other. The bandit with a scar on his face recalled the meeting with Daichi and Kairna, where they were defeated. He tensed up and said he had already warned that the guards were very dangerous. The bandit with the crooked nose said that only 2 guards know how to fight. The bandit with the scar on his face replied that even if there are only 2 of them, it does not make them less dangerous. The rest of the bandits stood silently. The abandoned man with a crooked nose and a half-smile said that one of the guards was a Class B mage. Then he calmed the others and said everything would be fine. Since 5 mages from Ronda were also already here, 5 dark silhouettes stood nearby. Hearing this, Daichi, along with the cat that climbed out from under his jacket, and the rest of the boys were very surprised. Daichi got scared and thought that these bandits were on the same level as them. Karina frowned and said that it would not be easy. Karina told the guys that she went to report about those bandits. Daichi with a cat in his arms and Alicia stood behind Karina and smiled foolishly. Someone called Daichi, he flinched, and it turned out to be Alicia, who with a smile asked him to talk about his parents. The girl shouted that Daichi has such revolutionary theology as these world-class inventions. Daichi stood nearby and was puzzled. She scared him. He nervously agreed with her words. Daichi looked embarrassed. He hesitated whether to tell Alicia the truth because he himself did not understand these so-called technologies, and in fact they were simple goods. Daichi crossed his arms and thought that he needed to come up with something and say something else to Alicia to distract her and make her forget about her question. At that moment the kitten yawned, and Daichi had an idea. He said he had information for her. Alicia looked at Daichi and was glad at his words. Daichi loudly said that cats are very popular in his native country. He pointed with his finger. The cat became alert and raised its ears, and Alicia opened her mouth in surprise. Daichi and Alicia continued talking about how popular cats are in the country where Daichi is from, while the kitten sat next to the boys and watched them. Alicia said that she also loves cats very much, and therefore understands their popularity. But here, among the boys, cats are not so popular. Daichi replied that cats are very popular, and Alicia supported him. Daichi showed an image of a man bowing to a cat and recalled a cafe, telling Alicia that every 10th resident of his country has a cat at home, and that there are various cafes in his country where cats are praised. Daichi remembered social networks where you can post photos of cats that get a lot of likes, and explained to Alicia that if such a photo is sent out, it can spread over great distances. Daichi shouted that in his country there are various attributes for cats and many things in the shape of cats, and also mentioned cat houses and t-shirts with their images. Alicia was shocked by Daichi's story. She was filled with joy and could not believe that items could be in the shape of cats. Out of happiness, she crossed her arms on her chest near her heart. Alicia enthusiastically said that she understood the essence of cat things, but did not understand one thing. Why give ordinary objects the outlines of cats? Daichi laughed and began rummaging in his bag, found a handkerchief, and noticed a small flashlight that was glowing. Daichi took slippers, a watch, and a mug with drawn ears, a tail, and the face of seals or their contours out of the bag. Daichi said that after the first glance you would no longer be able to resist. From what she saw, Alicia shuddered with admiration, clenched her teeth, and blushed. She could say only one word: very cute. Daichi continued talking about things resembling cats, such as plates, pillows, adapters, and even cat-shaped uniforms. And to each of her words, Alicia responded that it was very cute, although she did not know what an adapter was. But everything was equally cute to her. Alicia fell to the ground with excitement and, getting up, said that she understood what Daichi meant, that cats must be cute. Alicia slightly stood up, barely keeping on her feet. She said that she expected nothing less from Daichi's homeland. They developed not only technologies but also simple household items. Daichi stood aside and smiled. Alicia lowered her head and tears flowed from her eyes. She shouted that she needed to make tools in the shape of cats. She had always dreamed of creating magical tools, but had never thought of such an idea before. Daichi put his hand on Alicia's bare shoulder, tried to calm her down, and said not to worry. Alicia was on her knees. Daichi knelt on one knee and continued holding her by the shoulder. He said that she should not imitate this because new ideas might not come to her. As a creator, she is not inferior to the creators and inventors from Daichi's homeland. Daichi got upset and suddenly started shouting that Alicia had lost and it was a complete failure. The cat sat next to him and scratched his face with its paw. Alicia looked at Daichi with enthusiasm. He kept shouting that now she should enjoy the cats. Daichi held Alicia by the back and opened tall doors before her, from the opening of which blinding light burst forth. He said she only needed to open the door to a new world. Alicia looked at Daichi and happily said she would do it. Alicia approached Daichi and said that he must teach her. Daichi replied kindly that he would teach her, she just needed to rely on him. Daichi thought that deceiving Alicia was difficult, and it tired him a little. Daichi continued telling Alicia about the characteristic features of cats, showed her a soft cat paw. Alicia did not understand what the object was, and Daichi replied that it was a device with which you can always crush a soft cat paw. Then Daichi showed the cat carrier. Alicia saw such a thing for the first time. Then he showed the cat in the carrier. She covered her mouth with her hand from joy and recognized him. It was Nick. The cat came out of its carrier. It was wearing a dress with bells. The cellist did not understand why the cat was so cute. The cat slightly bent its paws and laid its head on them. Wings appeared on his back. Then he turned back. A robot cat appeared with a tray in one paw. There was a drink on the tray, and the cat. Nick sat nearby, watching the robot. The robot cat greeted everyone and said to Daichi, "Technology plus cats." Alicia waved her hands and said that Daichi has to show her more things about cats. Daichi shouted that then we go further. Alice grew seal ears and paws. Her clothes also changed, and everyone started shouting that she needed to feel like a cat and become cute. Alice got scared and joined the game. Daichi told her to start meowing. Alicia covered her mouth with paw-shaped gloves and said she was too embarrassed. Daichi's eyes and face resembled a cat, and he asked Alicia to say meow at the end of the app. Alicia trembled in gloves, holding her hands like cat paws, opened her mouth wide, meowed, and arched like a cat. Daichi enthusiastically said that Alicia felt good and was very sweet. Alicia sat on her lap. She had a tail and paws on her feet. She raised her hands to her face and continued to meow. Daichi continued to praise her. Alicia changed into pajamas in the form of a cat. It was a jumpsuit with a hood and ears. She continued to meow, and Daichi looked at her and cried with joy and emotion. Daichi was delighted and began to loudly say that Alicia was doing well, and that this should be continued. Behind the enthusiast Daichi appeared the serious Karina. She was shocked by what was happening. Daichi and the guys were sitting in ambush and eavesdropping on the conversation of the bandits. Daichi believed that the 5 bandits were magicians of rank B. The bandit with a hump on his nose was smiling. Next to him stood his 2 assistants, one taller, the other significantly shorter, and Daichi looked at them and thought that this was why they seemed so confident. The bandit with a scar on his face said that he personally fought with the guards and had something to tell about it, and 3 bandits stood behind him. The man with a scar on his face said that it was better for them to wait until the guards left, and Daichi was surprised by the bandits' words. The leader of the three-person gang, laughing, asked if the man with the ball was afraid of the guards. He replied that yes, he was afraid of them. The man with the hooked nose was surprised by the truthful answer. The man with the scar said that the girl was also dangerous, but at least he understood how she defeated them, while he had no idea about the boy, and the image of Daichi appeared before him. The man with the scar frowned and said that he only understood that Daichi hit him with a piece of lead right in the leg. The man with the hooked nose scratched his face and said that it was probably earth magic. The bandit recalled the images of Karina and Daichi and said that if it had been a magic bullet, his armor would not have let it through, and added that the boy resorted to everything except magic. One of the bandits shouted that in that fight 2 of his comrades had their legs torn off, and that it was the work of that boy, and another replied that it was their own fault because they lost vigilance. Dennis began to think that there were only 6 bandits in the village. Fred sat down next to him and pondered his words. The man with the scar on his face said that he was wasting time, stomped his feet, and added that they needed to tell everything to the guys in the village. 3 men turned away and started walking. The last one said that the final decision would be made tomorrow and asked the other bandits to pray that the raid would be cancelled. The man agreed. Then I heard some noise and he turned around. Karina told the guys that they needed to go. The tree crowns, the trees were planted, and then a gorge and a cliff appeared. There were many bandits in the gorge. They surrounded a pile of barrels stacked near one of the walls. Everyone was looking at one point. Among them was a cat with one eye the size of a human. The man with the crooked nose said that Eli and his team underestimated the task. They fought with a girl from the guards and some guy who defeated them. One man from the crowd asked if he was sure that one of the guards was a magician of the B rank. He was a stocky blonde with a small beard, crossed his arms and waited for an answer. The man replied that there was only one sorceress there, and she had a mage guild badge. And another dark-haired man asked if the guy they met was really stronger than that mage. The man with the nose ring said that Elaine also noticed the boy, and he seemed to be much stronger than he looked. The men exchanged glances and began to talk about the next steps they were going to take. The man in the hood said that if these guys were from Bertram's company, they would have caused them a lot of trouble. 3 men stood silently and thought about what was happening. Many bandits stood and listened to the negotiations. One of them said that they were enough to defeat these people. Other men began to speak and doubt their strength. They were afraid that those guys were mages, and in the ranks, a dark-haired man with a beard said that they should not forget about themselves and needed to threaten others. A blond man with a beard shouted for everyone to be silent. A dark-haired man and a man with a scar turned towards the shout. Behind all the men sat a young guy who, with a cheerful smile, said that if the vigilantes started acting, it did not mean that Bertram's company would help them. The guy winked at one of the men. It was the blond man with a beard who asked everyone to be quiet, and said that the man had already managed to prepare a trap for those guys. The guy's name was Pete. He sat on the floor, leaning against one of the barrels. He said that the leader of Bertram's company was traveling with the caravan. Pete suggested setting traps for the vigilantes in advance, and tasked someone with luring them there. The blond man crossed his arms and said that the vigilantes were standing guard near the north gate, and Bertram's caravan had stopped near the south gate. The other men stood silently and listened to him. The man with the hooked nose said that everything was fine, because Alan had told them so. Pete introduced the attackers, and, smiling, said that if they attacked through the north gate, Bertram's squad would rush to help them. The men deliberated on what to do next. They wanted to take everything they could before reinforcements arrived or deal with the vigilantes. Since there was little valuable there, Pete looked at them in surprise. The men began to say that in this village, unlike the last one, there were many young girls to have fun with, and the conversation did not die down. The blond man was serious. He thought that nothing would come of it between them. The blond man pondered. He believed the plan was not perfect. It had many nuances. He thought about possible obstacles and ways to overcome them. The men continued to make noise and discuss the attack on Bertram's company and the loot that was in its wagons. The dark-haired man with a beard growled that the attack on Bertram's company would not succeed under any circumstances. They were too strong, and the bandits, hearing this, thought it over. Pete wiped his chin with his finger and said that a mage of such a level could become a big problem for them. The blonde asked Pete what he thought about the whole situation. Pete remembered Alan's face. He said that Alan was too scared, so his opinion should not be taken into account. Pete stood up and spread his arms. He said that everyone on Bertram's team was an excellent fighter. To minimize damage, they should avoid direct confrontation with them. Pete's mouth opened slightly. He stuck out his tongue and raised his hand to his chin. Then he said that they needed to arrange a surprise attack. The blonde looked at Pete in surprise and asked how Pete was going to do that. Pete continued standing with his arms stretched out to the sides. All the bandits stood and looked at him. Pete clasped his hands and smiled broadly. He said that they would easily defeat the Northgate warriors. The bandits looked at each other and rejoiced. Pete narrowed his eyes and continued saying that they could defeat the vigilantes if they went to Rama. Pete showed a little man he had drawn and said that if the vigilantes focused on defense, they would quickly defeat them. Pete said that if the vigilantes only defended themselves, the bandits could simply start robbing the village. The bandits raised their fists and weapons up and rejoiced at the upcoming victory. Pete closed his eyes and smiled. He thought that the enemy would behave in the way that was advantageous to them. Pete stood with his arms spread and said that the vigilantes were not fools. Most likely they would first gather all the villagers in the center of the village to protect them. The man with curly hair said that if they get rid of the vigilantes, then instead of them will come people from Bertram's company who remained in the village itself. The man in the hood and the man with the scar on his face looked at him and listened. The curly-haired man smiled and said that in that case those foolish vigilantes will scatter their forces, and Pete grimaced at what he heard, and thought that the only fool here was the curly-haired man. Pete turned into a half-box and said that the vigilantes will focus on defense. Pete looked at the blonde man, crossing his arms, and said that they need to buy time until Bertram's company comes to their aid. The curly-haired man was curious about what was holding them back, and then, to quickly get to the village, decided to rob the empty houses before help arrives, and immediately after that leave the village. The curly-haired man frowned and said that he doubted Pete's words that Bertram's company would arrive before they managed to leave the village. He believed that only a fool obsessed with robbery would fail to leave the village on time. The curly-haired man crossed his arms over his chest and loudly told me that they were not fools and would manage to leave on time. The bandit standing behind happily agreed. Pete covered his face with his hands and lowered his head. He was outraged and did not understand why he was surrounded by such fools. The curly-haired man calculated everything in his head and said that while Bertram's company sends reinforcements, they will already have time to leave the village with the loot. Pete showed the empty peasants' houses and said that if the village had been evacuated, there would be no money or supplies left in their homes. It would be a waste of time, and they would be left with nothing. The curly-haired man turned to the hooded man and said that it was simpler just to attack Bertram's company's caravan. The hooded man picked his nose and listened to his arguments. Pete closed his eyes and an idea came to him. Pete gestured and said that if they attack Bertram's company, they will face them face to face, which should be avoided because they are much stronger than ordinary Avengers. The curly-haired man approached Pete and said that in this situation they should not go to the ram because they might suddenly attack. Pete clenched his teeth, his lips trembled. Then Pete smiled and folded his hands. He said that they all think alike. The man with curls was embarrassed and agreed with Pete. Pete drove past the curly-haired man and addressed the other bandits. This meant that part of the forces would remain in the south, and the other would be sent to the center of the village to act as partisans. The bandits listened to Pete attentively. Pete explained the attack plan to the others. He showed the painted people. In the north, the bandits attacked the guards. In the south was Bertram's company and a man in the center. The partisans from the company went north to help the guards. Pete smiled and raised one finger. He said that when they get rid of the vigilantes, the peasants will lose faith in salvation and will have to deal only with Bertram's company. Pete paced back and forth and said that before the knights manage to come to the aid of the Avengers will be able to catch Bertram's detachment by surprise and rob it. The bandits noticed that the wagons with wealth stood without guards. Two of them said that if they attack Bertram's detachment, the residents will have time to flee and hide, and another replied that most likely people will start hiding in the wagons. The bandits continued talking and agreed on the plan of action, and the blonde looked at them and said that the attack on the Avengers was a setup, and Pete was going to tell them about it. Pete raised his hands, his face lit up with happiness, and he said that the blonde was right. When the bandits heard this, they became worried and looked angrily at Pete. Pete's face changed. A sinister smile appeared, and he said that now he would tell the real plan they would follow. The bandits were scared. The blonde man smiled. They were waiting for Pete's plan. Meanwhile, in one of the village houses, someone hit the table with a fist. An elderly man shouted fiercely, and two men were frightened when they heard it. The old man rose from the chair and spoke threateningly. He was surrounded by people. The events took place in the village elder's house. There was a meeting about the bandits. The bandits were hiding among the adventurers in their main group. The man was moving knights in helmets with spears. At the meeting, two issues were discussed. First, what to do with the received information about the robbers, and second, how to protect the village until reinforcements in the form of knights arrive. The old man concluded that the information leak occurred near the village of Takura, and most likely the bandits used the same methods against them. Teichi pondered. Daichi, Alicia, Frida, and Dennis sat at the table, on which the cat Nick sat, and there were mugs and a pitcher, and Daichi put his hands on the table and lay on them. Daichi put his head on his hands and said that they would agree with the plan devised at the general meeting. He showed the scheme. The village was surrounded by a high wall, and the exits were only to the north and south. The north was guarded by armed locals and adventurers. The south, the company. Daichi introduced these small people and said that they would be able to repel any attack. Part of the company would be sent to the center of the village, and the partisans with a detachment in the center would be able to help both the south and the north, and even notice the bandits' infiltration through the walls. Daichi was informed that civilians would be evacuated to the north and south to minimize possible losses. People would be placed in shelters. Daichi plans to propose this plan to Bertram's company. He recalled the stern face of the old man, and the bandits disguised as travelers would stand guard together with the militia at the north gate. Dennis raised his hand and said that Daichi was not afraid of the plan's failure, as a result of which they would be left with nothing. And Daichi looked at Dennis, thinking that this was a smart view of the situation. He closed one eye and said that the villagers would not come up with anything better than their plan, and even if they did, they would not have enough time to implement it. So in any case, they would have to agree with that guy's plan. Daichi slightly opened his mouth. He was surprised by Frida's frank story. Daichi and Alicia heard something and turned away. Frida said that, in her opinion, it was time for them to go. Dennis got up from the chair. His hands were on the table. He moved to visit the head. The brick corridors were illuminated by light penetrating through the windows. The guys met Karina, the leader, and another man in one of the corridors. The leader said threateningly that they had to act according to the plan. The plan was that Daichi, Alicia, Karina, Dennis, and Frida were to stay with Santa Claus at the south gates and prepare for the bandits' attack. The rest of the escort would stand in the center of the village under the command of Captain Jeffrey, a dark-haired man with several scars on his face, and they were to assist any group that needed help at any time. An order was given to prepare immediately to repel the attack, and the guys agreed. Soldiers ran around the camp with tents and carts, and one tent, which was different from the others, stood aside. He sat in the tent with a plastic water bottle and a pistol in his hands, thinking that he did not know how strong the bandits' magical armor was, so it was worth considering that his weapon might not cause them fatal harm. Next to Daichi lay various weapons, and he thought about which caliber to take with him. Daichi imagined himself in military uniform with both weapons in his hands, and thought that he would never know exactly which of the bandits was a level B mage, so it would be a mistake to shoot at everyone indiscriminately. Daichi opened his laptop and turned on a video about how to shoot correctly, thinking that he would first attack everyone indiscriminately, and those who survived he would finish off later or put everyone to sleep with gas. Daichi was distracted by a cat that brought him a package. He took the package, and nearby lay several different types of weapons. Daichi thought that the cat wanted to play with him, so the cat brought the package. At that moment, voices sounded from the radio on the table behind him. Daichi was surprised. On the other side, they said that the plan was fake. Daichi turned back to the table and to the radio station, which continued to say that their real target was Bertram's company. Daichi kept looking at the radio, smiled at what he heard, apologized to the cat, and said he would play with it a little later, while the cat sat and watched Daichi, who had turned away. Daichi stood by the table on which the radio lay. Sweat ran down his face. He was scared to learn that the plan turned out to be fake. The cat stood nearby and looked at the table. Voices were still coming from the radio, saying that the vigilantes were an easy target, and that they would indeed behave differently. Pete said with a slight smile that their real target was Bertram's company. There would be enough time to attack the village, and the chance to attack Bertram's company caravan might not come again, so they must not miss this opportunity. The blind man said that their real goal was the caravan's cargo. Pete said that the cargo was also very important, but he wanted to capture their leader. One of the bandits asked if anyone had seen what Bertram's head looked like. Pete pointed to the dark-haired man Joseph and said that he and Joseph knew what she looked like. Pete showed a painted man and told the bandits the plan that they would send their man who would deliberately lose the letter with their plan of action, and the adventurer near the northern gate would find it and learn about the plan. The men got angry and started saying that as soon as they found out about the letter, the company would immediately transfer its troops to the local Avengers. Another man said that most likely the company would just increase the number of people in the village center. Pete beamed with happiness. Pete thought that they would most likely move forces to the center and leave the main accomplices nearby, then raised his hand and said that those standing near the leader would be strong fighters who could defeat any enemy. The curly-haired man got angry and started pointing his finger at Pete, saying that Pete himself had told how strong Bertram's guards were, and now he seemed to be suggesting to the bandits to attack them and fight. Pete smiled and squinted one eye. He said that if he and the three men behind him did so, they would definitely win, and added that they would manage if the blonde boss was with them. The man in the hood said that they hadn't had strong opponents for a long time, and Joseph had to be careful not to burn them. The men began to swear and threaten each other. They were asked to calm down. Several bandits stepped aside and rejoiced at the plan. They were determined to win. Sinister smiles appeared on the faces of 5 bandits. They differed from the other bandits because each of them was a real soldier. Pete raised a finger, squinted, and said that they need to use them to feel more confident. The other bandits simultaneously looked in the same direction, into the depths of the gorge, from where terrible sounds came, but it was too dark to see anything. Some of the bandits looked into the darkness and were afraid, and one of them said that they decided to use their last trump card so as not to regret the defeat later. The gang leader extended his hand and said that everything was decided. Aliana and his people would be informed about the attack on the North Gate tomorrow night, and ordered me to write and send a fake letter. The bandits began to move and disperse around the cave, and their leader continued to demand writing the letter with the smallest details and shouted that the attack would begin tomorrow night. Daichi was squatting, resting his chin on his hand, and carefully listening to conversations on the radio. The bandits said that, as Pet said, they would attack that night if the bandits needed to gather quickly. Someone asked Daichi for permission to enter his tent. Daichi was surprised and scared. Karina said that Captain Jeffrey intercepted information about the bandits' plan, and the chief wanted to discuss it with Daichi as soon as possible. Daichi replied that he would come soon. Daichi put the phone in his pocket. The leader's tent. A torch was burning nearby. Inside the tent lay the bandits' letter. The leader raised his hand and said that the bandits would attack that night. Daichi and the rest of the guys looked at the leader and listened to him, and the leader showed the letter and said that the patrol detained a suspicious traveler who had a letter addressed to the bandits who entered the village. The leader with a serious face said that most likely the bandits realized that they had placed a partisan detachment in the center of the village. The leader frowned even more and said that the bandits want to quickly kill the guards to capture the North Gate. Painted men clearly showed the bandits' plan of action. The chief said they would be the next target. The bandits cannot defeat everyone together. They intend to deal with each one individually. Dennis said that this is a plan of real bandits. Frida said that this plan is doomed to fail if they do not have a good leader like in the army or the Night Watch. And she listened thoughtfully to the boys' conversation. The boys stood around the table at which the head of state was sitting. Dennis asked why he had gathered them here. The head struck the table with his hand. The chief shouted that he had no intention of allowing the bandits to do whatever they pleased. The partisan detachment had already been informed and was heading to the vigilantes. He wanted the boys to go to the North Gate to help. The boys listened to the leader with admiration. Dennis pressed his hand to his chest and said he would carry out the order, but he was curious about what the chief would be doing at that moment. The chief replied that he would stay with the merchants. Karina said she wanted to stay with the chief. The chief leaned back in his chair and clasped his fingers together. He said that the company's employees would protect him, and the man added that there was no need to worry. Dennis turned to the head and said that the boys would find it easier to fight if they were confident that the head was fine. Frida said that the head should accept Karina's offer of protection. The leader waved his hand and said that there are 5 mages of a certain level in the bandit squad, and Karina's absence could negatively affect the outcome of the battle. Vichy recalled the bandits' radio negotiations and understood their plan. Daichi suddenly approached the head and began shouting that before making a decision he needed to be heard, and the head asked if this conversation was urgent. Daichi said that the conversation was very urgent, and Southgate could not be left without security. The boss got angry and did not understand how Daichi's words could influence his decision. Daichi places a device on the table in front of the head and says that if he listens, he will immediately understand that everything the bandits invented turned out to be a deception. And the head looks at Daichi and the object he put on the table in surprise. The device began to emit sounds. A voice said that false information about the attack should be deliberately given. Another voice asked if Bertram's company should be lured directly into the trap. The guys were shocked by what they heard. The chief leaned over the device that was producing voices, heard the plan and its execution being discussed there, and could not believe that it was a human voice coming from this device. Frida covered her mouth with her hand in surprise. Dennis did not take his eyes off the table. Karina held her head, and Alicia smiled cheerfully. Daichi picked up the device and said that it was a real bandit's plan. The chief slightly opened his mouth and asked what instrument Daichi had brought, then changed his mind and said that this information was not important. And now he did not understand how this conversation appeared on the device and how Daichi got it. Daichi says that when they were in the forest after the bandits south of the village, about a kilometer from this place, they left their device there. The chief was shocked by what he heard. Daichi said that this conversation happened recently. A loud scream sounded that someone was approaching, and everyone frightened sharply turned toward the side from which the screen appeared. A soldier ran into the commander's tent, where the commander himself and the guys were, and reported that the northern gates were attacked and there was a fight. The guys turned back to him. He continued shouting that they had launched a signal into the sky. Chief Bropley stood up from the chair. Daichi looked at him. The chief leaned on the table with his hands and pondered how to act next. Daichi raised one hand, closed his eyes, and lowered his head. He said he had a plan. Daichi points to one of the objects on the map and says that they are using a bandit strategy against them. Daichi made a serious facial expression and said that actually everything is very simple. Daichi vividly laid out his plan in the form of figures drawn by a person and said that the robbers would come from the south. The guys would flank them and set up an ambush on the path between the southern forest and the gates. Daichi pointed to the map. The guys carefully followed his movements. He said that everything would work out. The bandits must think that everything is going according to their plan. Daichi continued speaking and presenting little people, said that the guys must make the bandits believe that all southern forces were transferred to the northern gates. Hichi said that he, Karina, Frid, Dennis, and Alicia would stay with the caravan, and the civilians in masks would go north instead. Then the chief will stand in the square, as if he alone guards the gate. He will become bait for the bandits, and the boys will go around them from the other side and suddenly attack. Daichi cheerfully said that even if their surprise attack fails, they will gain enough time for the main claws to reach the center of the village. Karina got angry and slammed her hand on the table, saying it was very dangerous. Daichi calmly replied that the bandits will attack, so soon there will be no time to discuss the risk, and Kaina said that the bandits are heading to the south gate, so she suggested simply leading everyone back. Dennis crossed his arms and said that it wouldn't work. Frida thoughtfully put her hand on her chin and said that the bandits would arrive before help comes. The boys thought they could meet the bandits in the center of the village to buy time until the squad arrives from the north. Karina said that if the militia stood by the northern gates, the company forces would be strong and they could defeat everyone. Karina raised both hands up and happily said that she was right. Dennis opened his mouth and said that if they only cared about fighting, Karina would be right. Frito stood next to Dennis. They looked at Karina. The chief leaned forward, frowned, and listened to the boys, and Frida said that in her opinion, he would not approve Karina's plan. Daichi closed his eyes, bowed his head, and crossed his arms. He said that they could gather all the bandits in the center of the village, but in reality, they wanted to kidnap Chief Klaus. Karina was surprised, and Daichi reminded her about the civilians in the south who had not yet evacuated. The atmosphere around Karina changed. She became depressed. Karina stood with clenched fists and lowered head. Daichi turned and looked at Karina. The boys stood before Chief Klaus and wondered what the chances were that they could defeat the bandits when Daichi broke the silence and said he had a secret weapon. The clan chief looked threateningly at the boys, clasped his fingers in front of his face, and said that Daichi's special weapon could defeat 60 bandits, including 5 rank mages. They wondered whether Daichi knew how to use mass destruction magic, or a magical tool with similar functions. Daichi thought, pressed his lips, and said that he could drive the bandits from their positions without killing them. The guys surrounding him were shocked by what they heard. Loyal Klaus did not understand how this was possible. Karina hit the table with her fists, began pointing her finger at Daichi, and angrily said that he was not fit to be a bandit and had to stop being so frivolous. And Dennis's hand appeared in front of Karina, trying to hold her back. Dennis pushed Karina back and stood in front of her. Karina did not understand what was happening. Dennis began to say that no one could just believe that Daichi would cope with the bandits of the 60s. Dennis frowned and said that it sounded even more incredible, that the bandits would survive after that. The leader raised a finger and said that he agreed with Dennis. He wanted to find out how Daichi would implement his plan and was waiting for an explanation. Daichi put his hand in the bag and said that he really did not want to show the secret weapon in advance, pulled the item out of the bag, raised his hand to his face, and added that, without it, it would not work. So he would explain everything to them now. Daichi showed the secret weapon. There was no one near the handkerchief. Nearby were several torches and another handkerchief. The village was quiet. Behind the stone fence a river flowed. There was a bridge over it and a house stood nearby. And beyond were only fields. Daichi and the rest of the guys stood outside and waited. Daichi looked at Alicia, who was suspended from the upcoming operation by the decision of the leadership. But Alicia objected to the leader's decision and said that in her opinion, it was more practical to use offensive magic outside the village. Then Klaus withdrew his words. Daichi glanced aside and thought that Alicia specialized in ranged spells. Karina told Daichi that he was completely sure that the plan would go smoothly. Daichi turned his head to Karina. Daichi turned around and said that he could not fully convince them, but if the boss considered his plan too dangerous, the guys could leave, and he would finish everything himself. If the plan failed, Daichi would open a massive rifle fire. Alicia appeared behind Daichi and scared him. Alicia smiled, and it seemed that in case of failure she would help him and use magic. It was quiet outside. Only Karina's screams could be heard. She said she would not allow them to be alone together. They replied that without him, they would not be able to carry out the second part of the plan. Karina stretched out her hand in front of her and said she would be with them until the end, even if the second stage of the plan failed. She frowned and said everyone would go together, even if she had to carry the boys herself, and sharply turned away. Daichi nervously scratched his face with his hand and smiling said that Karina should not worry so much. Dennis raised his hand to his face and said he had heard about Daichi's talents, but did not understand how he could remain so confident. Fried smiled and said that no matter how strong or weak the enemy, one must never lower their guard. Karina said discontentedly that she considers Daichi a high-level mage, but he has no combat experience. Daichi was surprised. Kaina touched Daichi's chest with her finger and said that there were cases when a talented mage died at the hands of a petty thief because he lacked experience, and all such mages had one common trait. Karina grimaced and said that all these mages are too overconfident. Daichi looked at her in surprise and thought that this is difficult. Daichi raised his fist to his face, coughed, closed his eyes, and said that in his homeland they say, if you know yourself and your enemy, you need not worry about the outcome or hundreds of battles. Karina looked surprised. She did not understand what this expression meant. Alicia stood behind Karina and smiled. Daichi turned away from Karina and said that if you know your own capabilities and those of the enemy, then even in hundreds of battles victory will be yours. This is what this proverb means. Alicia admired Daichi's erudition. Karina stood behind and said she understood the general meaning of that expression. Daichi raised his hand and said that they know the enemy's plan, and this is their main advantage. They use this plan against the enemy. Karina objected, said she understands him, but he was still careless because the guys were talking. Daichi spread his arms to the sides and thought that the guys did not believe him. He felt that in their eyes he was a naive boy. He said that maybe he lacked experience, but had enough knowledge. Daichi thought that he had read a lot of different literature, especially historical, and his knowledge of military strategy was much deeper than that of an ordinary student. Daichi kept thinking that this was his first battle, but he was not afraid. He was glad to have the opportunity to test his knowledge, was serious, and thought he could think smartly. And Alicia said in surprise that they had arrived. Alicia shouted that the bandits were a kilometer away from them. Karina drew her sword and said that everyone needed to prepare. Alicia needed to put on physical protection and fortifications. Daichi tensed and thought that with a kilometer left, all they could do was wait for the bandits to approach, and Alicia noticed something. Alicia shouted to the guys who rushed into battle that besides the bandits there were also 6 royal monkeys, and the bandits together with the monsters rushed at them. Daichi smiled. The other guys were shocked by this turn of events. Karina and Daichi turned back and rushed to Alicia. The guys came closer, wanted to find out who was controlling the monkeys, and noticed that they were moving. Daichi remembered that someone was controlling the royal monkeys because these monsters are used in battles, and Karina pointed towards the forest, saying that there were only 66 bandits there, among whom were 6 royal monkeys. Karina looked towards the forest and said that everything was bad. Denny shouted anxiously that there were more bandits than they expected, and with them were 6 monkeys. Frida said that they needed to retreat. Karina tensed. Alicia shouted that the bandits had accelerated. Karina stood nearby. Daichi, surrounded by magical sparks, said that he would stay to hold them off and ordered the others to inform the leader, because he was sure that his plan did not depend on the number of opponents. Karina turned to Daichi, was furious and said that he was not talking nonsense, and Daichi smiled and replied that the number of bandits did not affect the execution of his plan, and he needed to increase the number of projectiles. Karina gaped in surprise and looked at Daichi. Alicia said that she would stay with Daichi. Karina and Daichi looked at her with their mouths open. Alicia said that her offensive magic in the village would be useless, smiled and added that with body-strengthening magic she would easily catch up with Daichi. Karina objected that she was the leader of the squad, and everyone should listen to her. Alicia interrupted her and said that the bandits were 700 meters away. Karina shuddered with fear. Then they said that they would not move from their place like that. Karina and Frida stood next to him. Karina clenched her fists in anger and said she would stay with the boys, and Frida and Daichi should also stay to help. Frida drew her sword, and Dennis said they were counting on Daichi. Daichi looked at the boys, smiled and gave a thumbs up. On the road to the forest, no one was visible yet. Alicia reported that the bandits were already 600 meters away. The boys took battle positions and prepared for the attack. Alicia raised her hand, and Daichi, noticing this, decided it was a signal. The distance shortened to 500 meters. All the boys looked at Alicia's hand. Alicia bent one finger, leaving 4. Daichi stroked the cat peeking out of his bosom. On Alicia's hand were 3 straightened fingers, then 2 straightened fingers remained. The field already showed bandits approaching the boys. When they got closer, their faces were already visible. Daichi gritted his teeth and thought that when there were 200 meters left, he could already see their faces. He was worried whether he would manage to get the weapon if the decontamination plan did not work. Only 1 unbent finger remained on Alicia's hand. The bandits were within reach. Each of the boys closed their eyes and covered their ears with their hands. Daichi stretched out his hands and activated his power. Grenades rained down from the sky. The bandits immediately looked at the grenades falling on them, were surprised by what they saw. Deafening grenades rained from the sky, which stunned them for a while, and a bright flash illuminated the bandits. Peta, the curly-haired man, and the rest of the bandits were struck by the grenade's effect. They were illuminated by the brightest flash. Daichi turned away from the flash, closed his eyes and covered his ears. After the explosion, he opened his eyes slightly and got up to check whether the plan worked or not. The bandits closed their eyes and were confused. Some stood still. Others lay on the ground trying to regain consciousness. The royal monkeys lay on the ground. Daichi looked at the bandits and smiled. Karina stood, covering her eyes and ears. Daichi touched her back and showed that she could already look around. Bullets and spinning lights descended into the sky. The bandits lay on the ground. Dennis looked scared at what was happening. He did not understand what had happened. Frito looked into the field and guessed that bandits might be lying there. Karina looked at Daichi and asked who he was. Daichi looked at her and froze. Daichi spread his arms and said it was time to catch the bandits. Daichi and the guys headed to where the bandits had gathered. Karina followed Daichi and watched him closely. Daichi thought that the guy still needed time to get used to what was happening. Daichi presented his equipment and realized he had to somehow limit the bandits' ability to see ahead, so he decided to use a net. Daichi began to use magic and said that he had to be safe.